Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I'm really happy to welcome Scott Larson back to Word Balloon. It's been a while, but good to see you, man.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Scott, I'm looking at my list right now. The writer-artist of Visitations has worked in the comic book industry for over 10 years. He started as an assistant to DC and Marvel inker Andrew Peatboy. He's drawn comics for the educational publisher Capstone, doing comics about Marie Curie and radioactivity, as well as for companies like Marcosia, where he did Kong, King of Skull Island, and Heretic, and AC Comics, Femforce, Moonstone Books on stuff like The Saint and the great Golden Age character, The Heap, Zenescope, 1,000 Ways to Die, and Hook, and Tidal Wave Productions, where he did Victoria's Secret Service. But we are here today to talk about Scott's own creation. He's up to issue 7 on Visitations, everybody. Now, this is the on-a-print coloring book, and you can get this still at Amazon as a digital coloring book, I suppose, right?
You can get it in print, actually, I believe. Okay. If it's ordered through it, they print it up there.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, that's great, man. That's great, because I really do love when creators make coloring book versions of their art and stuff. But Visitations is a really cool book that ties into real Chicago history, along with some great ghost stories as well, both original and based on true Chicago historic moments and stuff. Great stuff, man. And again, you know, we're both lifelong Chicagoans, and we appreciate the history and really great, rich history of ghost stories as well.
Oh, thanks. The ghost stories in there are not real. I didn't want to tread on any spiritual feet just in case someone was paying attention. And, you know, the way I describe the book, if you're in Chicago, is it's the history of Chicago as seen through the eyes of the residents of the city's oldest cemetery. If you're in Baltimore or New York or St. Louis or anywhere else where I am, then it's the history of the 20th century as seen through the eyes of the residents of an old Victorian cemetery. So either way, Chicago has been such a cog in the machine of the United States since its founding that you almost can't have U.S. history without Chicago.
100%, man. No, we're in the middle of the country, and God, for years before air travel became regular, if you were taking a train from New York to L.A., you would stop. The 20th century would stop at Union Station. I'll be at Union Station tomorrow. I'm taking it downstate to go to Illinois State University, and I love going to Union Station because it really does feel like Chicago history. If you're a Hitchcock fan, North by Northwest, a good chunk of the movie happens in Chicago, and you've got Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint at Union Station while they're on their train heading towards Rapid City, South Dakota. But I love that movie, and I love seeing old Chicago and stuff. And that's why, all right, so they're not ghost stories inspired by Chicago, but certainly a lot of the locales and stuff. And
right.
Kind of historical fiction, basically. Tell me.
Yeah, I was inspired in part by the Untouchables and the 90s TV show, which no one remembers.
I remember that show.
Okay.
Tom
Amandis.
I was going to say, Greek guy. Amandis, absolutely. And the guy who played Capone, great character actor. You've seen him in a million things. I don't remember his name.
William Forsythe.
William Forsythe, of course. Nice going. No, that's a good show, man. You're right, man. Dave Ferber, who writes a lot of comics and stuff, and also a television writer. He was talking about. I think he had a Twitter feed this week talking about shows that aren't on DVD or streaming that you wish were. And I would absolutely put the Untouchables on that list. Is it on DVD anymore?
Yeah, it is. And as a matter of fact, I just finished a huge Untouchables deep dive. So I actually started with the second season of that show, and then I had never finished the 1950 show. So I watched all of that, and then I watched the movie, and then I started the 90s show all over again, and I just finished it up, and now it needs to be put away for a while. But yeah, it was released on DVD in 2017.
Very cool. That's great to hear, man. No, I love that show. And also Crime Story.
I haven't seen that.
You know, that's fantastic, and that's early '60s Chicago, and it's Dennis Farina, and it's awesome. Oh, hi, Faith. Faith is watching. One of my ISU buddies. Good to see you, Faith. Thanks for watching today.
Hi, Faith.
She's great. Like I was saying earlier, Faith, I don't know if you caught it. I'm going to Illinois State tomorrow. I'm going to be on the train. It's about the early '60s Chicago, and it's such a great show. Anthony Dennison is the mob bad guy, and I don't know if you know the Chicago actor. Oh, now and his name just blew out of my head. Damn it! God, he's in Thief, and he was on Miami Vice. John Santucci.
You know what? I'll bet you if I saw his face, I'd know who he was, but you know the name rings absolutely no bells whatsoever.
Well, Santucci was a real. He's in Thief with the late James Caan in the Michael Mann movie, and he was a real thief, and he even was a technical advisor on the film. But he was this great character actor, and he's like the number 2 on Crime Story. But it's a great show, and it really does. It's about the real cops that were in what was called the Patch, which was a really heavy crime. There you go. Scott knows your Chicago history. Absolutely.
Sure. Well, that's where the Patch is over on the west side. And that's where, we finally broke the mob in Chicago. And I say that like this because personally, I don't think we did anything.
Not
really. But it was 2007. And it was Operation Family Secrets is what the name of the sting operation was. And the guy who was the dad in there actually came from the Patch.
That makes sense.
And so there was a lot of, when I was studying that history, there was a lot there. And actually, I have a really interesting story about that. So, the book deals with a lot of Chicago neighborhoods. And one of the neighborhoods is the Levee District in issue number 3, which you read, I believe. And when I'm at comic conventions, especially here in Chicago, I like to point out the history of stuff, and I like to show the book off. And when I did the book, I tried to make every issue different. So the first issue is an introduction to the characters. The second issue, you actually have to turn it in order to read it. Unless it's digital, then it's just like whatever. But the third issue is a point of view story. And the point of view story takes place in the Levee District, which was right over by where McCormick Place, where C2E2 is.
Well, we'll be in 2 weeks. Absolutely, man. And
in last December, when I was at C2E2 2021, people were walking by and I was showing them the book, and, I was giving the sales pitch and everything. And I'm showing the third issue to this group of people who stopped. And they take a look, and I start to describe what the levee was. And the guy who's there says, "Oh, I know all about the levee. That's where my family is from, the family." And I stopped and I said, "Can I ask your family name?" And he said, "No, you may not." And I'm
awesome.
like, "Oh, okay." And
that's there's a map. You don't need to know.
Right. And there's a map in the book. And I'm showing him the map, and the girl he's with points out one of the places, and she goes, "That's where I live." And so I gave him a free copy of it, but I thought that was really interesting.
That's great, man.
One of the things that's interesting about that with Chicago neighborhoods is they don't change. I was shocked that the family was still in that area.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I live over by Lincoln Square, and
sure.
I grew up here, and I was gone for about 20 years. And when I came back, the thing I noticed was it didn't look any different. I mean, I could almost see my parents walking around. There really is not a huge difference. So it's interesting.
No, absolutely. I've talked about my grandmother on my mother's side, and poor thing was widowed when she was still in her 30s. She had 3 kids, and the boys took care of her. And she used to have essentially what would be a bodega now, like a little grocery store that, was, kind of, you could get deli sandwiches there. And she used to make submarine sandwiches there and stuff. They were amazing. But it was right by where the Como Inn used to be, which was a great Italian restaurant from the day. My mother's favorite restaurant, actually, before she passed away. And that whole neighborhood. And I know there was a great family story where when Tony Accardo, who was one of the big mob bosses, with the big tuna.
Tony Batters.
What's that? Yes, Tony Batters. You're absolutely right. And featured in The Irishman, the Netflix movie. is one of the characters in The Irishman and a real life person. And this is when he was young, and my grandmother apparently saw him breaking into a car. And she's like, Tony Carter, what are you doing in that man's car? And he's like, hey, it's okay, Ann. It's all taken care of. Don't worry about a thing. And she had in the back of her grocery store this giant table. And we were never allowed to put supplies when they would come in from trucks and delivery trucks or whatever. We were never able to use the table. Finally, my oldest cousin is like, Grandma, what's the deal with the table? How come we can't put anything down there? She's like, well, sometimes the boys from the neighborhood come in and they need to have a meeting. And that table has to be available for them to all sit down and do business. And we're like, okay. And that's fine. And again, hey, man, they protected my grandmother. And that was a rough neighborhood. And nobody touched her. And it's like, that's a widow. Leave her alone. She's with us. And it's like, okay. So, listen, I'm all for law and order, but I got to say, the boys took care of my grandmother when she needed it most. And this is literally like depression years and war years and stuff. And they protected her heart. So I was, it's like, that's kind of cool. So I'm glad, so there's
it was crime with rules.
Yes.
It was crime with rules.
Yes.
And it's really, it's interesting. I was talking to Danny Fingeroth, and he gave me he sent me towards a book about Jewish Chicago gangsters back in the 1920s.
Sure.
And the thing that's interesting is where they was over not too far from where I am, over in like the Lincolnwood area and over on Devon Avenue and Kimball and everything else. And, that's still a very large Jewish area. And it was really interesting. Yeah. It was really interesting to see that.
No, I'm with you, man. I got to interview a couple times Studs Terkel before he passed away, the great writer, wonderful broadcaster, by the way, as well. And he always had great stories and stuff about, the Chicago's best. And this is what's great about Visitations too. You really have all the eras. In fact, Obama figures in one of your issues as well. Issue 6?
Issue 7.
It is the new issue.
You're one of the only people who's read that story, by the way. Because the print copy just showed up.
Give people the 10-cent general focus of Visitations. We've talked about it at Supernatural Stories. It is based in Chicago. Graceland Cemetery, clearly an inspiration for a lot of what you do.
And I can explain the origin of the book. I'd been working in comics for a long time, and you read the list of things that I had worked on.
Yeah.
And the thing with comic books, for anybody who's in the business or anyone who wants to get into a business, the thing you need to know is that comics is a production line unless you're doing it all yourself. And you have a writer, you have a penciler, you have an inker, you have a letterer, and somewhere in that production chain, something always goes awry. And it happened to me countless times, and it's just part of the thing. But you after a while, it's like I would like to see what my work would look like if this person hadn't like screwed it up. And and I've had a lot of people who've worked on my stuff too. Jeff Austin is a fantastic inker who did stuff for me on FemForce, and I learned a lot just from his inking. But somebody somewhere along the line, the lettering got screwed up once, and it's like, how could you how did that screw this up? And so I was looking for something new to do. And around the same time, I had discovered that I had ancestors who were buried in Graceland Cemetery. And
wow.
Graceland Cemetery, for anyone who doesn't know, it's very close to Wrigley Field, which is where the Cubs play.
Just north of Wrigley Field. That's right.
Right. And it's where the founding fathers of Chicago are buried, or a lot of them anyway.
Absolutely, man. No, from now it's Bloomingdale's. Bloomingdale's co-opted the Marshall Field stores.
Right.
Marshall Field was a big that family was a very wealthy family. They started the department store Marshall Fields. The Field Museum is theirs. WFLD, which is one of our UHF channels, was started by the Field, family. And also, I'm a boxing guy, as you know. Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion, is buried in Graceland. Great, amazing, monument, just black marble and just Johnson. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty cool. And no, there are a lot of famous Chicago important people that are buried in great. It's an amazing cemetery, and it's so worth walking through and taking a tour.
It's very interesting. And what I found when I was walking through there was, those monuments are weird looking. There are some very creepy monuments. And and I walked through there. My wife and I walked through there actually. And we got up to this monument that looks like the Spectre from DC Comics, and it's called Eternal Silence. And there's a legend where if you look in its face, you see a vision of your own death. I don't know if that's true or not because I was too afraid to look. But
kind of Alex Ross's interpretation of the Spectre in Kingdom Come. I don't know. I think
you think he used that?
That's a really good question. I got to ask him the next time I talk to him, because and I never made that connection until you pointed out that it looked like the Spectre, and it's like, yeah, it does, but it is that, and you of course use that based on that figure and stuff. That's one of your main characters in it.
Well, he's one of the characters in number 7. I had to completely change the colors so it wouldn't look like the Spectre.
Sure,
and I had to change the face and everything. But one of the weird things about it was you take a look at the cloak, and people would like scratch graffiti into the cloak and everything else. But people had also put coins by the feet. And the reason for that is that they saw it as a ferryman, who takes you across the river Styx.
Sure.
And it was just very strange. And we're walking around, and I'm seeing like a girl sitting in Potter Palmer's grave, like eating a sandwich. And there's all kinds of other stuff. And I look, and there's this girl jogging down through the cemetery. And I'm watching her, and I'm thinking, what in the world could she dream about at night? Because everything goes in. And so I'm looking at that, and I found out because I go to bed that night and I wake up the next day, and the plot for the first issue was in my head when I woke up. And so the characters are all based on monuments in either Graceland Cemetery or in other cemeteries around the world.
Oh, that's great, man.
And so the way I describe it is they're like a ghost Justice League, and they solve crimes while history unfolds in the background.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing. So do you want to tease for issue 7? As we said, there's an Obama component to the story.
Sure. Well, Barack Obama, he wasn't born in Chicago, but he certainly lived here for a long time. And I used to do a lot of political work. And in 2000, as a matter of fact, in 2004, when he was running for the Senate, I ended up at one of his indoor rallies.
Sure.
And I was like 5 feet from him. And everybody was like gathered around him. Right. It was right after he gave that speech at the DNC.
Yep. He was the keynote speaker at the Democratic convention. Yes.
Right. And all these people are gathered around him. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to let them, bother him. I'm not going to like get in his way or ask for a picture or anything. And 4 years later, I was like, you idiot. It was like, I didn't see it though. I just didn't see it. Went right over my head.
That's ironic because I have a good friend of mine that I grew up with in high school. His grandparents and parents were very involved in the Illinois Democratic Party. And amazing stories about Obama. And even when he was a state senator before the U.S. Senate, my friend's like, this guy's going places. It's like, this guy is going to be an important Washington figure. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And it really interesting, and the family really was friends from both sides of the political aisle. Don Rumsfeld on the Republican side was a good family friend, and his grandfather was good friends with Harry Truman. And actually, like, the family still has handwritten letters from Truman to their grandfather and stuff. It's pretty cool. So yeah, it's interesting family. So yeah, that was kind of how I was aware. So how does Obama tie into visitations?
Well, what I'm trying to do, I want to show like basically history from the turn of the century up to present day.
Absolutely.
And quite frankly, I don't know how long I'm going to live, and I don't know how far I'm going to get with this story. Although I'm getting towards the end of the turn of the century part, and I'm going to leap into the 1920s. So I'm really excited about that. But
awesome.
but I wanted to show every aspect. And what I tried to do with issue 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is show a little bit of the future and then have it kind of go into the past. So with, for example, I show the moon landing in issue 5, and I show, Harold Washington dying in issue 6.
One of our Chicago mayors, a black mayor
Right.
here, who was a very pivotal Chicago
Oh
politician.
yeah, it was huge.
Yeah,
Absolutely
well, I'm saying this for
huge.
obviously the listeners that are listening and going to Harold Washington. It's like, yeah, he's a big deal.
Yeah, he was a big deal. And the funny thing about that story, and you looked at the issue, I'm assuming, and the other thing that happened that week, which was the pirated broadcast that broke into Doctor Who, and
the Max Headroom mask. Yes.
Yeah.
It's on everybody. That's on YouTube. You can see it. And our local public station was running Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. And this guy was able to cut into the signal, and he was wearing a Max Headroom mask, which was a very timely thing to have because Max Headroom was still a big deal on MTV and the like and everything. And yeah, it was this bizarre,
and they still haven't found him. They still have no clue who it was, but it was such a big deal that it was carried on CNN, and it was all over the place. It was a little freaky. I mean, I was only 17 at the time, but watching it was a little weird. And then, like 3 days later, the mayor of Chicago dies, and so it was, it was. I tied the two in together because I thought that it fit.
That's so funny. Well, you're right, and the Max Headroom kind of head was kind of scary, and it really was this kind of like out of nowhere, very poltergeist, for people, in terms of like what's happening to my TV or Videodrome, if you remember that fine film. So yeah,
that was probably our equivalent to the War of the Worlds thing in 1938, where the broadcast came in and everyone thought it was real. There's always something strange that happens.
That's awesome, man.
So
goddamn funny.
With Obama, actually, Len Strazewski, who used to write stuff for DC Comics, he did Justice Society, and he did The Fly, and he did Starman for a while, the old Star or the 80s Starman, and he's the person who I always bounce things off of. So when I came up with the idea for the book and I showed it to him, and I'm like, this is what the first issue is. And he just looked at it. He's like, well, who's that character? And I said, I don't know. It came to me in a dream. And he's like, okay, well, I think this is the background for that character. I'm like, okay, that's the background. And then he's like, how about that character? I don't know. It came to me in a dream. And then he basically came up with some of the backgrounds of these characters. And he liked the idea of the day before Barack Obama becomes president or is elected president.
Okay.
And so he was really, we talked about that opening scene, and we had talked about it a few times over the years.
Okay.
Because I came up with this in 2015, and it's taking me a while to get to stuff. So he actually hasn't seen it yet. But he was really the inspiration for that scene.
Wow.
And it was a good one. It was a good idea.
He's a great writer, man. Is he in Chicago?
Yes, he is.
Does he teach at Columbia? Where is he?
He just retired.
Oh, good for him.
So yeah, he retired within the past couple of years.
That's awesome, man.
But yeah, he had taught it at Columbia for a while, and now he's just a retired guy. And he does a lot of writing for medical journals and things of that, or medical advertising and medical reporting. So he knows anything you need to know about like drug companies and all of that stuff. Which is like heroes and villains itself.
Well, indeed. But that's a lucrative field. So good for Len. That's fantastic, man. Very, very cool. I was always a big fan of his writing and stuff. That's great, man. Did you expand? You sent me the PDFs of all 7 issues.
Yeah.
The first issue really has a lot of great back matter to it.
Yeah. One of the things that I found with you're talking about after the story where it's like, this is what's
right.
I had always had like a little text piece in there, But what I found is when I go to conventions, and especially if I'm like in a couple of weeks and I'm at C2E2,
right,
2 books will sell the best: the first issue and then the seventh issue this time. It's always the first one and the latest one.
Okay.
And I thought about it. It's like, well, you know what? If this is an introduction and I've done all this other stuff, then people need to see what else is coming up, with the exception of just like a little blurb, because I set those, there was that thing at the end where it's like, this is what's coming next. And it's like Slaughter at the Stockyards and the Great Balloon Disaster and Victrola of Doom. I just came up with those titles. I had no clue what the story was when I did that. But now the stories are there. So, and the, one of the interesting things too is I'm not a writer, I'm an artist. And it was funny because I spoke with J.M. DeMatteis recently, and he was talking about his process and how he writes. And I listened to it, and I talked to Tom DeFalco as well, and he talked about his process. And when they both talked about it, DeFalco actually does thumbnails of his stories before he starts writing them. And
interesting.
And DeMatteis like lays in the middle of the ground and like lets whatever is going to happen. And I don't lay down in the middle of the floor, but when I start a story, 9 times out of 10, I have no clue where it's going by the time it ends up. That last scene in the Obama issue, there's 2 stories in that one. There's the thing with the Iroquois, and that was kind of planned. But the last page of the Obama one, that came to me like at the last minute, and I'm like, oh, I have to put that in there.
Cool.
And the thing with the characters in that one too, I end up doing 2 social justice issues in the series. The first one is number 3 with the Levy District, dealing with prostitution. And the second one is dealing with racism in issue 7. And I hadn't intended that story to be that way when I started it. At first, it was going to be a gangster story. And then the characters had other ideas. And so it just kind of like took like this weird turn. And I'm actually slightly nervous about it because, I'm talking about things I really don't know a whole lot about. And it's like, do I have a right to be saying something about this? And especially in the climate that we're in now. But it's like, well, you know what? That's the way it goes. The characters are telling me to do this. So this is what I'm doing.
There you go. Langley is joining us. Great Southside Chicago guy. Good to see you, Langley. Fantastic.
Hi, Langley.
Langley is probably anticipating our Star Trek talk that's coming later.
Okay.
But mentioning that, did you watch Lovecraft Country? And are you, and some of the stuff they talk about regarding? I mean, Chicago actually plays a big part in that.
I've never even heard of that.
Oh wow, it's an HBO series, and Scott, maybe that's good because I know like our friend Tim Seeley, when he was doing Hack Slash. Mm-hmm. He stayed away from Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, because he didn't want to be influenced by it. And the same thing too, it wasn't Tim in this case, but I know that, oh my God, Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman stayed away from World War Z, Max Brooks's book.
Oh, okay.
He didn't want to be influenced by that.
Right.
And it's like, no, I get that, man. So yeah, it's, I was wondering, it's an interesting story, and it's really about, it takes a supernatural turn, but it really is kind of about, unfortunately, those towns in the middle of America where they had the sundown rules. Mm-hmm. And you didn't want to be a person of color after dark because the cops would come and really hassle you and everything. Why? What are you doing on the road? Well,
right.
Driving. Right. But of course, this is during the asshole era of our white heritage. So yeah.
That's like every era.
Yeah, let's be honest. Absolutely.
Right. It's just,
but it is getting it even in the face of the cold culture war that we find ourselves in. I do think it is getting better. There is louder people on the wrong side of the argument, but I would say, and yes, their voices have been amplified by actions nationally and state by state stuff. But that said, I really do think overall things are getting better.
Well, it's really interesting because we've had all these real historical things happen within the past, even the past couple months, if not the past couple weeks. And I try not to get emotionally involved. I mean, I do. I'm lying because I totally do. But I do try, if I talk to other people, I try to take a step back. And I do love history. And it's interesting to see the way history is turning and moving in a certain direction. And it's one of those things where in a lot of ways, it's almost like we don't have control. History has its own way of doing things. And you go back to something like World War II, and you have these giants in power. You have Roosevelt and Churchill and Stalin and Mussolini and Hitler, and they were mental giants in a lot of ways. And they had these ideas about the world. And, I'm not condoning anybody's ideas, but it's really interesting to see that they all converged at the same time, at the same place. And I think that we just happen to be going through one of those eras now. I would have liked it if I had died first and then we went through this, but it is interesting to kind of watch it as it's happening.
No, I understand, and sadly I feel the same way. And I'm a student of history as well, and I've been fortunate to talk to people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who experienced the culture wars of the '60s firsthand, and is still out there commenting on it now on Substack. Actually, I was reading his Hollywood Reporter essays for a really long time, but Substack got smart and actually went after him to give him a Substack space and everything, which is smart. But yeah, it's like, no, we need people that have that perspective and can tell you and compare some of the hotter times. And I would always, pump my dad and my uncles for World War II era information for that matter as well. So no, I get it. And again, like you said, we're right. Chicago's right in the thick of it. I mean, and also you and I are old enough to know that time, even though the country eventually got connected by the coaxial cable. So we had coast to coast television and all that stuff. It was the generations before us where each big city really was its own little cultural and political fiefdom. Well, and Chicago, and being the broadcast guy that I am and stuff, I'm very cognizant of Chicago's importance to television history. And a lot of even network NBC shows were being originated from Chicago, and even going back to the radio days and stuff.
One of the interesting things about that is, So, the book is steeped in Chicago history, and I'm going to be going to the Baltimore convention in October. Now, I've been there before, and I do have fans in Baltimore. But I've decided that I'm going to do some things for them during the convention. And I always try to tell like Baltimore or Maryland ghost stories anyway. But I'm doing a little historical picture print, like the first page of Visitations, only of the Baltimore skyline.
Oh, that's great.
And I start looking at the history of Baltimore, and it's like they had a great fire at the turn of the century. All of these same things seem to happen. It didn't matter what city you were in. There's these common threads that kind of cross over between city and city and city. Yep. And, and the interesting thing about Baltimore is it's a free city. It's not part of Maryland. It's just located in Maryland. It's its own like entity, like Washington, D.C.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's amazing.
And so there's a lot of history there too. But the thing that really surprised me was how closely aligned it was with Chicago. They had gangsters. New York had gangsters. We had gangsters. There were gangsters all over the place in the 20s because the Italian immigrants didn't just stop in New York or stop in Chicago. They're all over the place.
Of course.
And so there are these commonalities between these cities within the United States that I didn't realize until I started doing research in other cities. And it's like, wow, this is the same. There's no difference. Just the name.
First of all, not just Italians, but a lot of the ethnicities, and they're moving illegal liquor from city to city, and or when it was coming down from Canada and stuff. So no, you're right, man. And it really, the Gus Russo did a great book, and if you're not aware of it, it really would likely inspire a lot of Visitations stories. It's called The Outfit, and it literally is.
I know the book. I haven't read it.
It's great. It's about the business structure of the mob.
Sure.
Both the illegal businesses and the legitimate businesses. Like they were a big part, and in every city, once again, the music industry. And one of the big things, and especially through Chicago, the jukeboxes
Mhm.
were like made in Chicago
Mhm.
and run by the mob. And in
Mhm.
fact, I was talking to a friend today. There's a female singer from the 50s and 60s. She was in Camelot the musical in the original cast and played Guinevere. Her name was Carol Lawrence, and Carol
Mhm.
Lawrence's father was a mob boss.
Mhm.
And one of the ways they made her famous was she would cut records, and we had record companies here in Chicago, Brunswick and Swan, these companies that really were major record labels in the 50s and 60s.
Mhm.
And the mob would have a jukebox, and they would put Carol Lawrence records in these jukeboxes in every bar or whatever. And really, one of the Stooges like jobs was going in with a roll of dimes or quarters and play a bunch of Carol Lawrence records. And then, this woman is very popular. Maybe we need to put her in things. And she was a talented singer. She was a great singer. But I had no idea. And it was in Rousseau's book. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea this is how Carol Lawrence became famous. So crazy shit. Crazy
Well,
shit.
the other thing with that era, and we don't talk about it much now, but people certainly did in like in the 40s and 50s and 60s when they started kind of deconstructing the history of the Prohibition era. A lot of those guys were like World War I guys.
Oh,
And they came
absolutely.
back from the war and they couldn't find jobs or anything else. And, they knew how to fire guns and they knew how to throw grenades. And that's kind of what they just fell into.
Sadly, yes. I'm with you, man. No, and you're right about that. And again, it's very interesting, and it's very much the immigrant story.
Mhm.
And again, I mean, my family's Greek. I don't know what your background of your family is.
Irish and Swedish.
There you go. Well, there you go, man. And that's the thing, man. We had Greek hoods, we had Irish hoods. Come on,
Mhm.
So no, that's awesome, man. Another thing too, and you and I ought to sit down. I would love to see you take a visitation's turn about Chicago in the 50s when the mob really had a stranglehold on boxing.
Mhm.
And again, like I said, Jack Johnson is in Graceland, but I would think there's a lot of great potential for some specters of the fighters and some of the crooks that were involved here in Chicago and stuff. And that
Well,
might make for a fun story.
I don't know if I thought I told you this in the past, but maybe not. My grandfather was a boxer in the 20s when it was illegal here in Chicago.
That's right.
He had a fake name. His fake name was Jimmy Duffy, even though his real name was Raymond Larson.
Okay.
And I have, I'm not going to dig it out now, but I do have like some of the printed stuff with his name on it and some of his fighting and things of that nature.
That's great.
And I didn't understand why it was illegal. And there was a book that came out a few years ago. I think it was called Bloody Valentines, and it was about Machine Gun Jack McGurn and his and I forget what her name was, but his mall. And they grew up. She grew up over in Edgewater.
Okay, very ritzy, very upscale, right on the lake.
Right.
For people who don't know the geography of Chicago, that was a very affluent neighborhood of Chicago.
Right. It's basically in between Uptown and Rogers Park.
Yeah.
And she went to Senn High School, and then she quit. She got into a car accident at 17 or something like that. But it was a really interesting book because it talked about Machine Gun Jack McGurn, and he was a boxer. And they explained why it was illegal in that era. And I didn't know why. And what had happened was there was a boxing match that got out of hand. And the crowd started like trampling each other and things of that nature. And the city council were like, this is illegal now, and that's just, sure. It didn't last long, but it did last for a little while.
No, it did. And in fact, the Jack Dempsey Gene Tunney fight that happened at Soldier Field, there's their rematch where Tunney won the fight, but in the 7th round, Dempsey had a rally and put Tunney on his ass. And it became controversial because they felt like the referee gave Tunney more than a count of 10 to revive himself. And people have scrutinized that film of that fight in the same way that they scrutinize the Kennedy Zapruder film in Dallas. And it's like, all right, let's look at Tunney's eyes. And, at the count of 2, he looks ready. And, it was this very famous fight. In fact, I did an audio documentary about it for the 75th anniversary of the fight back in 2002. And so no, and talking to the both boxing experts and Chicago experts. We were talking about how they had finally re-legalized boxing in Illinois and in Chicago, and they came up with new rules. And that's where the neutral corner rule came up, where after a fighter is knocked down, the guy who knocked the guy down has to go to a neutral corner before the count starts, or at least, whatever. And Dempsey had forgotten because it was a brand new rule. And he was used to hovering over his opponent, literally, because it used to be legal, where literally, as the guy was trying to get back up, you could knock him back down. So Dempsey was going for that move, and Dave Barry, the referee, is like, no, neutral corner, get over there. And then he started the count. So it was like 4 or 5 seconds before the ref started the count and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, again, my boxing bullshit. I was just talking to Dan Panosian, and I didn't know his father was a Cleveland middleweight. So yeah, I'm as you know, man, I'm a massive, and in fact, my last word balloon guest just wrote a Muhammad Ali bio comic book. So yeah, I'm if it's not Star Trek and it's not comics, it's boxing with me.
Right.
So, but that's great, man. No, so again, not this coming weekend, everybody, but the weekend after, the first weekend in August, C2E2 here at McCormick Place in Chicago, downtown Chicago. Scott's going to be there in Artist Alley and selling visitations.
And I'm going to be doing a ghost history panel there as well on Saturday night.
Awesome.
It's Chicago Ghostly Landmarks. So one of the interesting things that's happened to me since I've been working on the book, I'm not a horror fan. I'm not a ghost fan. I'm not into any of that stuff. But when something comes to you, you take advantage of it.
Interesting.
But one of the things that's happened to me while I've been working on the book is people have come up and told me they're true ghost stories.
Sure.
And I've done research myself, and there's a whole slew of ghost hunters in the city.
Oh yeah.
And I've had the pleasure of being around them and going to the ghost convention and seeing, hearing all of these different legends. So I have a pretty good idea of the real Chicago ghosts. So we're talking about, it's myself and these people who run a podcast called the Ghostly Podcast. And what it is one person is skeptical and the other person is a believer, and then they fight it out during the podcast. Sure. But we're talking about the Hancock Building, which is supposedly haunted. We're talking about Water Tower. We're talking about the Marina Towers.
I had no idea these places.
Wrigley Field has 3 different ghosts. You can probably figure out who one of them is.
I'm assuming one of them's a baseball player, obviously.
One is a baseball player, but that's not the one I'm talking about.
Was it a Wrigley family member or something? Is it? Wrigley Field?
How long have you lived in the city?
I know. Shame on me.
Yeah.
I know. Seriously, shame on me.
Well, now you're going to have to come to the panel and find out who it is. Because I'm not telling.
It's crazy, man. I've worked in the Hancock. That's I've spent years in sports radio at Wrigley Field. So it is kind of funny that I've been, and it's certainly Marina Towers. Good Lord. It's one of my favorite buildings in Chicago. If people remember poor Steve McQueen, one of his last movies, The Hunter, has that great scene where he drives a car out of one of the windows of Marina Tower and stuff. And it's like, oh my God. So no, I love Marina, right by the House of Blues, everybody, if you ever come to Chicago. So yeah, no, I honestly, man, I don't know about you, Scott, or what kind of opportunities you had, but I have in my radio career several times where it's like, hey, you want to come work in San Francisco? Hey, you want to come work at ESPN in Bristol? And sadly, the money wasn't right. But I got to say, at the end of the day, I'm glad I've been here because I love this city. I love the history. I love the culture. Sure, listen, a lot of warts in Chicago, as you know, and we have a lot of stains in our history, just as much as bright spots and stuff. Sure, but it's a fascinating city, and as I mentioned, the great studs Turkle and Nelson Algren, and some of our great literary reps that came through Chicago. And that's why, man, it was like talking to studs. It's like I'm literally talking to a guy who lived Chicago history, who lived, he was 14 when Dempsey and Tunney fought at Soldier Field. And that was the first time I had a reason to go and interview him. And oh my God, I was very fortunate to have a handful of conversations with him over the years. And he wouldn't remember me, and that's fine. He was in his late 80s and early 90s when I would talk to him. But what a sweet guy, and what a brilliant man. And oh God, we had him on The Score And it was so funny because really all these people were calling in, I can't believe you have that communist on. And he's like, he's not a communist. He is a socialist, but he's not a communist. But it's like, go away, mouth breather. Shut up.
Yeah.
This man is living Chicago history. All of his books are so amazing. And that's truly, I had so much respect for him as a writer and an interviewer. I mean, just there's Chicago Public Radio has created a repository of all his a lot of his radio interviews that he did over the decades. I mean, starting literally from the 50s through the 90s, he was still doing it at WFMT, our classical radio station here in town. And there are these incredible conversations with literally historic figures from the 20th century, from gospel singers like Mahalia Jackson to Janis Joplin, Muhammad Ali, Laurie Anderson, Lou Reed's widow and wonderful performing artist of the 80s and stuff. Fat Buckminster Fuller, Arthur C. Clarke. I mean, just literally every facet. And Studs was just this consummate armchair expert that could handle himself in any topic. And he's one of my broadcast heroes for real. You know?
Well, one of the interesting things about that. So I do this stuff at conventions where I talk about ghost history stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got my comic there. And actually, for anybody who's interested in a free digital copy of the first issue, just email me and I send those out because I want people to read the book and I want them to enjoy it.
Give me the URL or your email.
It's,
we'll put it up on the screen right now.
Yeah, the email address is visitationscomicbook, all one word, @gmail.com.
I'm writing that up as we're speaking, and I will have it up momentarily. Visitationscomicbook@gmail.com.
Yeah. So, but I go around to different places and I tell these stories, and I found myself in a couple of retirement homes where people go and then they bring guests in to come and talk. And John Drummond apparently goes around and does talks about Chicago gangsters, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, he's got to have a wealth of knowledge that I would
absolutely he does. Go on. I know John Drummond. Go on.
So I just found that really interesting that that you were talking about Studs Terkel, but we have a lot of other reporters here too.
Oh God, yeah,
really very interesting.
Well, and as you likely know, and it truly was one of my favorite moments of watching movies in the 90s and in the theater, the Fugitive movie with Harrison Ford, shot in Chicago. And as Scott and I know, growing up here, John Drummond was the CBS crime reporter on the local news, and literally would start a stand-up in front of a mobster's house and say, I'm standing in front of the home of Sam Momo Giancana, or I'm standing in front of the home of Tony the Big Tuna Accardo. And there's a great scene after the murder of Dr. Kimball's wife. I'm standing in front of the home of Dr. Richard Kimball. And the entire audience is laughing their asses off because it's like, oh, it must be time for the news. I mean, this is something we would watch on the 10 o'clock news every goddamn day. And he came to The Score, my sports radio station, a lot in the 90s because in addition to being on the crime beat, he was the number 3 sports reporter. So a lot of times when the main guys were out in the field doing other stories, John would do stories in Chicago. And John is like the consummate Jack Webb dragnet kind of guy. Literally trench coat, fedora hat. He had a matching fedora that was a houndstooth pattern, same as his jacket. And his nickname was after the British detective John Drummond. We all called him Bulldog Drummond. And literally, like all of us with our thick Chicago accents, hey, look, it's Bulldog. Hey, nice. Come on in, Bulldog. Tell us a story about the mob. I'd be happy to, fellas. And we would have him. We have him in studio, and he's written 2 amazing books of Chicago gangster anecdotes. He knows them all. He knew them all. I was fortunate enough a couple years ago to work on a Kennedy conspiracy show, and I wanted John to be one of the talking heads because I'm like, all right, well, he's in his 90s now and still with us, thank God. Sure. He lives in suburban Chicago. He and his wife, very happy little, retirement life and everything. And I called him up and I'm like, John, I'm doing this Kennedy assassination conspiracy thing. I said, would you like to be part of it? And he said, well, John, actually, he goes, when the assassination happened, I was still in Milwaukee. So I wouldn't feel right to be on this show and represent whatever was happening in Chicago at that moment. And he said, however, I did interview Jack Ruby, the guy who shot Oswald. And I asked him, and he goes, do you want to ask me about that right now? I said, sure. I said, why did Ruby like stumble into the Dallas police station and shoot? Like, how did he get to that close to Oswald and stuff? Well, as some might know, Jack Ruby was a strip club owner in Dallas. Prior to that, he was part of the Chicago mob, and worked for Giancana and the other Chicago boys and stuff. But he said, according to Ruby, he was wiring like $1,000 in cash going to Western Union to send to one of his stripper girls that was working in another city and needed some sort of advance. And I guess the Western Union office was in a dicey part of Dallas. So, and he had $1,000 in cash on him, so he needed a gun to protect himself. This is what Jack is telling Bulldog. And he goes, all the cops knew him because they all would go to his strip club and go watch the strippers. So I was like, oh, okay, hey, Jack's over here. Hey, nice. Come on in, Jack, whatever. And that's how he got through. And I said, well, how about that whole, because this was one of the points of the TV show. What about the potential mob connection to the assassination? And Bulldog just takes a beat and he goes, it's all a bunch of shit, John. And let me tell you why. And he explained, and again, I mean, he's certainly older than me. He knew all the guys. He knew all the characters. I'll take his word for it. But, oh, man, it was so – I'm so glad – or I'm so sad that he didn't come on camera because he was just so delightful. I love John Drummond, and I'm so glad you mentioned him because I immediately will go to those kind of stories and talk about how much fun we would have with him.
Sure.
So, yeah, great guy. Great guy. Very cool. Everybody, you can see at the bottom, and I'll say it again, to get a free copy of issue 1 of Visitations, you can email Scott at visitationscomicbook@gmail.com. So that's cool. So you got time for a little Star Trek talk?
Sure.
Attaboy. I can always count on Scott to talk Star Trek, both on the air and as he knows, we text.
Oh yeah, I know. It's like hours and hours and hours. And I get a sweet guy from my wife, and then it's like I gotta go, John.
We in fact independently ran into each other when the Deep Space Nine documentary came out, and that was really like, hey, awesome! I didn't know you were into Star Trek. Bad news. Now I'm going to bug you for the rest of our lives.
Oh, that's all right.
I know, man.
It's always cool. Fun.
Absolutely, man. So a lot of big Star Trek news this weekend.
Yeah, it was. I had gone to that Mission Chicago, and that was in April, and it was. That was fun. There wasn't a whole lot of new information there, but there was a point where Rebecca Romaine had like walked past me on the show floor, and I was like, ah!
Oh my God.
And my wife was like, you yelled at her. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? But yeah, it was, there wasn't a whole lot of information coming out of that. And with San Diego, that's where they lay everything out. And I was shocked by the stuff that we got over the course of the past couple of days. And, you had sent me a message about that panel. And I asked about if you had gotten to the Strange New Worlds because, and you've watched the whole thing, I'm assuming, yeah?
I'm still at the first 5 or 10 minutes of the Strange New World panel. They're on YouTube, everybody. The full Paramount Plus it's like an hour and 20 minutes or so. And they put the whole thing on there, and they went from Card to Lower Decks to Strange New Worlds. And as Langley is pointing out, he doesn't know what to think about one of the big announcements, which is there's going to be a Strange New World live action and also animation Lower Decks crossover. And watching the panel, it sounds like both Mariner and Boimler are going to be both live action and animated. And apparently, at the very least, it sounds like Anson Mount is going to be animated as well. Okay. So as Lanny says, he doesn't know what to think about that. I hope it's not. I mean, I'm sure it'll be goofy, but I really hope there is a story and not just a fuck around episode. But I have my suspicions that it's going to mostly be a fuck around episode.
It might be, but it'll still be fun. And the thing is, when I heard that, I didn't know that going into that panel.
Neither did I.
And when the panel when the panel was going on, that's why I asked you, because when they announced it, I was like, what? that. And that was this morning. And, I'd gone through like all this stuff with Lower Decks and DS9 and blah, 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 blah. And then I saw that and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this doesn't stop. It's like this avalanche of Star Trek stuff, and it's like it's a nerd's paradise. It's like, this is great. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take this, and you're like Homer Simpson dancing through the land of chocolate.
Sure.
It's not ending,
The land of chocolate. Langley says he worries that it feels like the Enterprise finale that was really a TNG episode. Yeah, maybe. I think two things. One, yes, it is an avalanche of news. Well, Paramount is not like Disney or Netflix or Amazon, where there are dozens and dozens of shows and movies to watch. So I really feel that they, in the same way that Disney both handles Marvel and Star Wars, that it's like, oh, no, we need programming, if not every month, then like, all right, only a month between whatever the next thing is. And obviously we see that with Ms. Marvel just wrapping up, and She-Hulk is coming at the end of August. And
that too, I saw that trailer, and I know some people who weren't super thrilled about She-Hulk, but I was like, this looks awesome.
I think it looks great too, man.
So great. I can't
agree.
wait. I think the CGI is really questionable.
Oh, okay.
But it's like, you know what? It's they haven't evolved. They're kind of stuck in one place with that stuff now.
Sure.
And we haven't reached the next plateau. And it might be a good decade before we get there, but it's going to be what it's going to be, and I think it'll be fun. I can't wait.
Have you, were you watching Orphan Black, Tatiana Maslany's previous show that was on BBC America? She's great. And truly, like from season 1 of Orphan Black, I'm like, watch out for this actress because she is amazing. And I know I was at San Diego for her first Orphan Black year. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't in Hall H, but it was in one of the bigger ballrooms. And no, she like literally hit the ground as a rock star because she's that good. And I think she's fantastic as Jessica Walters. Walters? Is that her last name?
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking of the actress instead of the comic or whatever. But
I gotta wonder, are they gonna put her in the Fantastic Four?
I hope so.
I hope so too. I think that it would. Well, it wasn't going to get worse, Langley.
Yeah, he goes, I'm so excited. The CG has gotten better from the last trailer. And also, it's exactly what I envisioned for She-Hulk live action show, fourth wall breaking and everything. Absolutely. That trailer is just outstanding. I really loved it. And I know a friend who I suspect when the show comes on is going to go, yeah, I was really hoping that we'd get more of what's his face as Hulk. And it's like, the show is She-Hulk. I'm sure Mark Russo is obviously, based on the trailer, going to have a lot of scenes.
Oh my God. It's like he's taking over the entire trailer.
Well, I mean, and I understand that because you need that to kind of introduce and open, walk people through the door and go, no, this is good. And this is why. And also he's so funny. Ruffalo, not Russo. Yeah. I mean, I think he's great, but it's like, no, man, it's about She-Hulk. I mean, it's like, that's good. So, yeah, Langley agrees. He says Tatiana's an amazing actress. I totally agree with that.
Well, it was really funny, and I know we want to talk about Star Trek, but I have another comment about She-Hulk. Well, sure. One of the pieces of feedback I got was from somebody who was upset that the She-Hulk seemed to be stronger than the Hulk. And it's like, well, you know what? This is like Professor Hulk. That's his weakest point, isn't it?
I would agree. I agree.
So,
I think. Yeah.
He's not raging or anything like that. So he is down a few.
Well, he's calmer. Yeah.
And she was always supposed to be on par with the Thing from my recollection of the Byrne days.
Sure.
So it made sense to me.
Hey, I got no problem. She-Hulk is awesome. She's also very sexy. I will say it. Mm-hmm. And I love it. And I love that they got into the whole breaking the fourth wall thing, as I believe Langley was mentioned.
Oh yeah. When she turns to the camera, I'm like, oh, you're doing it, And
just that great look at her face, like, what are you doing here? At first she just acknowledges us, and then it's like, wait a minute, what? Why are you here? And I love that. No, I think it's great, and I'm excited. And also, not only the Byrne years, but I thought Dan Slott when he was writing She-Hulk.
Yeah, he did a great job.
It's a shame that it didn't last longer because he understands the character too.
Yeah,
So
he was on that book for a while. What have you thought about his Fantastic Four?
I love it. Love it. I mean,
interesting.
honestly, man. Oh God, I mean, even going back to when he and Mark Waringo would do the occasional like miniseries, or when during his Spider-Man run, when the Fantastic Four would show up. Oh, good stuff. Amazing stuff. No, Dan gets it. Dan really, he's wrapping up. It's going to end up.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of sad about that because, you know, he had. I think writers have a. I think they have a shelf life on characters, and I think the shelf life is about 60 issues, and then it's like the milk that starts going bad in the refrigerator, and you're smelling it, and you're like, maybe it's still okay, maybe it isn't, and then and it's not just Dan Slott, it's a lot of other people that I can name, but I'm not going to. But I don't know how long he's. I know he's been on the book for a while, but the thing about his run on the Fantastic Four, you know, I read it during the Burn days. And you don't get better than that. You just don't.
Well, Stan and Jack, I would say.
Yeah, but you don't count them because they're the creators.
Well, and Byrne was using them as the blueprint of what he was doing. So no, it was great.
But for the past 30 to 40 years, it's like, when is this book going to get better? When is this? And I'm not saying there hasn't been good stuff, because there has been some good stuff sprinkled through. But you know, Slott's run, I felt it was like Byrne light, which is not a bad way to go. And I think he did some fun things, and I was really glad with a lot of it. And, you know, and he didn't make waves. He didn't do anything wrong. He told these great fun stories. And I think that I'm a good year behind. So I haven't read the entire run yet, but I'm getting closer.
Did you read when it was Doom's wedding?
I did.
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, you know, the funniest thing is you read this stuff, and I read it all in one great big lump, and it was right around the beginning of the new year, and so much has happened since then. I'm like, what happened again? You know, it's not like when I was 15 and I'd read these books over and over and over. I know them backwards and forwards. I could probably still recite Amazing Spider-Man 271 backwards and forwards, but I'll be damned if I know what happened in the last issue.
I understand.
I bought last week.
And the same with She-Hulk with Dan. The Fantastic Four is a great place to put humor. And that's why, especially that Marriage of Dr. Dooms, that issue in particular, that's just so great, like the reaction shots. And I don't know, do we spoil? I mean, it's been a year or so, but like, it turns out, Johnny slept with the bride before.
Right. And
when that's discovered,
he had forgiven them of everything, right?
What's that?
Doom had forgiven them of everything, and they were all friends. And then with that, it just all collapsed back in.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But also just the reaction shots of everybody after that, like, is made known. And they're just great, like silent, like just box, character moments and panels. Mm-hmm. And it's so great. And I mean, like Dan gets it. Or my favorite was when in Brand New Day, after Peter's identity was revealed.
Yeah.
Or no, actually it was after, when they reversed it, and everybody, like the big magic moment of, no, the world is going to forget the thing that Spider-Man was. It included the Fantastic Four, and it really bummed Peter out, because he really was like part of the family. Right. And there was this great couple part story, and it literally ended with this beautiful family moment of like Sue and all of them hugging him and like, oh, Peter, how could we forget you? We're sorry. And it was just this beautiful moment. And that's the thing, man. No, Dan is a massive Marvel fan. He absolutely respects canon and tells these great stories without, coloring outside the lines. As you and I have talked about with Star Trek, that's sometimes my frustration with new Trek, is when they take liberties with canon.
Yeah, you know what? When I was growing up, my favorite show was War of the Worlds.
Oh, sure.
88. And actually, the characters in Visitations are named after the characters from War of the Worlds.
I didn't put that together. That's awesome.
Yeah, nobody remembers that show except for me, and I pull it out once a year and rewatch the whole thing. But they had 2 seasons, and the first season was done by people who worked on The Next Generation, and then Paramount fired them and brought the people who worked on Friday the 13th, the series, in. And these people came in and they threw canon right out the window, and it ticked everybody off. And for me as a fan, because I love the show so much, I wasn't going to abandon it because I thought that the stories were stronger in the second year.
Okay.
And I'm in the minority on that, but I thought they were really strong. And so I found a way to make them fit together in my head. And so when you have like little things in Star Trek where a character says something and it's different from, I don't even care, because I had to deal with War of the Worlds, where the entire world changed in between seasons, and the entire canon was thrown away. And so that stuff just doesn't bug me too much.
Okay. Well, again, and as I've told you, and I've said it, I'm sure, on the show a few times, I think the tough thing that New Trek has to deal with is the fact that the reruns are still out there, not only streaming, but even over the air. And it's on 6 nights a week. If you have MeTV and Heroes and Icons, it's Star Trek reruns are on 6 nights a week, every show, including Enterprise. And it's like you can try to break new ground and fly in the face of continuity, but it's like, well, I mean, you're competing with the best and worst episodes, but the best performances as well. So, let's get back to Star Trek news.
Sure.
In terms of what they released and everything. I'm excited for season 3 of Picard, and I've been a harsh critic of both seasons of Picard, but hearing Terry Matalas on a bunch of podcast interviews, and also being fortunate while you were at your table at Fan Expo Chicago, I went over and got to talk to John Frakes and John Delancey and Gates McFadden. And it's great, as you saw on the panel from San Diego, Gates was gushing about season 3 to me personally, the way she was on that panel, and really excited for what they got for Crusher to do. I saw one of the earlier comments that Langley is really excited that, and also Wayne, another guy that's watching right now, they both mentioned that Worf does look like Worf, thank God. And
we had talked about that. You and I had a conversation about that, and I never thought he was going to be blue or anything ridiculous like that. But the thing that I was concerned about was that, the thing that Star Trek is doing right now, and they're doing it because it's easier on the actors and it's easier on the makeup people, is they're taking these masks and putting them over the actor's face. And the Orion villain from Discovery season 3 was definitely like all masked up, even though she was just covered in makeup. And so I was really concerned they were going to do that with Worf. And again, they're doing it because it's easier on the actors and it's easier for the makeup people. It doesn't take as long and all of that. But it's like, God, man, I hope they don't do that. And I'm glad that they didn't, or at least it appears as if they're not doing that.
Well, and also, it's funny, the same show that I heard Terry Matalas really go into detail of what he wants to do with Picard season 3. It's called Inglorious Treksperts, and they have an episode that they dropped this weekend. And Michael Westmore, the old Rick Berman era Star Trek makeup man, talked a lot about the kind of makeup he did back then, the kind of makeup that's done now. He did mention full-headed masks that are being made and stuff. It's really, really interesting.
Well, they hold him up as like the inspiration. I mean, these guys working on Trek, I know that, certainly since the premiere of Discovery, before Discovery even premiered, it was dragged through the mud, which was a shame.
Go on, because I would disagree with that, but go ahead and make
I didn't watch it. I didn't see it until Picard came on.
Well, but that's not before. I mean, again,
I remember the months leading up to Discovery, and it was getting reamed left and right, and it was going to be a failure, and they were going to make an anthology show, and they were already scrapping everything they were doing. It was fan bull crap.
Well, if it's fan bullshit, I'll swear. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing. The only thing I would say is we were all like, okay, you're going to focus on a single character rather than the crew, whatever. I think until they finally are like, and guess what? She's Spock's sister. That's what fucked everybody up, and still does to this day. We're 4 seasons in, and I've yet to see the reason why Michael Burnham needed to be Spock's sister. I am all for her being raised by Vulcans. It is a shame that they didn't have her raised by different Vulcans, because as you and I have talked about, and I've said it here, they miss a lot of good character conversations that could get really deep. And I think hearing Sarek compare his situation with, had Michael been raised by other Vulcans, oh, your son is half human, I'm raising a human, what's that like, what's similar, what do you notice, that kind of thing. And I would say the same thing, and you and I have talked about it, and I mentioned it on the last time I did a Trek show, was with the 10th episode of Strange New Worlds, having James Kirk. And I feel terrible. And actually, I have a little more confidence watching Paul Wesley at the panel, and I hope his Kirk loosens up the way Paul Wesley was loose. Well, we'll see. But I really felt that, and I heard all the excuses why, his Kirk in that episode was very uninspiring. And also, some friends have told me, well, you know, Pike's the hero, so he's got to be the hero in those conversations. I'm like, no. You need a strong adversary, or at least somebody that's in disagreement. They weren't adversaries, but Kirk obviously had a different way of handling the Romulans than Pike did. And while he said the right things and had the right actions, what was missing, and you don't need a Shatner imitation to do this, is charisma, confidence in what you say, and this kind of military command swagger. And I believe even Cadet James Kirk and Ensign James Kirk and Lieutenant Kirk probably had that same swagger. Sure. And it's, who's this guy? Now this guy's in the room. What does this guy have to say? And I just didn't feel that from Paul Wesley's performance.
You know, we spoke about this, and, you know, my feeling was he just didn't look like him at all. And it's like, you could have at least dyed his hair. You know, you could have made his hair a little bit lighter. You could have done something. He was too thin, you know, and you take a look at Shatner in that episode, you know, there's all kinds of things on YouTube where they're showing him side by side, and Paul Wesley looks like he needs to eat for about a month before he gets to that.
A malnourished Kirk.
And
this is Kirk after he was on that planet with Kodos, the executioner, and everybody was starving. So maybe that's that Kirk. I don't know.
But you know what? It is what it is, and
we're stuck with it.
Right? Yeah, we're stuck with it. I mean, unless there's enough fan backlash that they. But you know, it's going to be what it's going to be. It's not what I would have chosen. And it sounded like he didn't even go through auditions or anything. That they just picked him.
Yes, I go ahead, because
it's kind of like, okay, well, you know what? I'm happy with New Trek overall. Okay. I don't think it's perfect. But what is? You know, we talked about how I abandoned Enterprise because I was bored by it, and you know, Voyager in its last 2 years was a waste. So you know, you had what is it, 4 90s, and I'll lump Enterprise in with the 90s stuff, 4 90s shows. And out of that, you have one good solid show, and that was DS9. You had The Next Generation, which had its ups and downs. You had Voyager, which was promising and fell apart like almost immediately. And anytime they would go up to the line where it was about to get exciting, they just go to put their toe over it, and then they like retreat. And then you had Enterprise, which was dull. And
a lot of that was network interference in both the cases of Voyager and Enterprise, where Brown and Braga and Rick Berman, Voyager itself being in the Delta Quadrant, while they had UPN going, we want more like Next Generation, please. That's what we want. So you're right. I mean, Year in Hell, the stuff that happens in Year in Hell should have been happening across the 7 seasons. And Voyager should have been a much more banged up ship, or had alien technology grafted on it so that they could continue to survive. And other than the Year in Hell, which they wanted to do as a whole season, and the network fought back and said, no, we'll give you a 2-parter, but that's it. So when you learn stuff like that, I'm a little kinder. My feeling is a third of the Voyager episodes are really great Star Trek, but only a third. And then there's a third that's mundane, and then there's a third that sucks. And I totally agree with you that in especially the 7th season, it's like, will you please just get home? Because these are bullshit stories. You're spinning your wheels. Let's get home, please.
Well,
but in Enterprise, again, they wanted. I mean, by that point, it was like in Multiplicity when Michael Keaton is making copies of copies, and that one clone that he makes and stuff is kind of simple because he's a copy of a copy of a copy.
Right. Well, you know, the thing with Enterprise, that I think part of the problem with Enterprise, and I think this is the same problem with Picard, is I think that the casting didn't work. You know, we were watching, my wife and I were watching the episodes with Brent Spiner. And, you know, and Archer is like climbing up a ladder and it looks like he's going to fall. And I'm like, gee, if they kill him, that would be a step in the right direction for the show, because it's not, I love Scott Bakula. I love Quantum Leap. I really do.
He was great.
But I don't think he was right for that role. And
I like Archer and I liked his performance, but I've heard other people say the same thing.
And you know, the security officer, I mean, I felt really bad because at Star Trek,
Malcolm.
Yeah, at Star Trek Mission Chicago, you know, you had all these people. You had some of the DS9 people, you had the Enterprise people, you had the Discovery people, you had everybody was there. Yeah. Everybody had a line except for the Enterprise people, and it was sad. Yeah, it was, and my wife is like, go say something to them. I'm like, I didn't really like their show. I don't know what to say. You know, it's like I'd rather stand in line and see Nana Visitor. It's like, you know, if I have a choice, and so that was, you know, I just think that the time was wrong. I think the casting, that I don't think they gelled well together. And I think that's been part of the problem with Picard as well.
Well, I agree with that. And I think that way about Discovery as well, frankly. I don't like Discovery at all.
I think, you know, Saru, I think, is fantastic. I like Burnham.
I
like her a lot.
I don't like Burnham. Again, finally in the 4th season, they gave other crew members things to do and were more important to the story.
Well, they listened to the fans.
Well, thank God. Because again, I would say the same thing even from a comedic standpoint with Lower Decks. It's like you're trying way too hard with what you consider to be the number one character. And where I fault New Trek, and they should learn the lesson of the Rick Berman era of Trek, where it's like, this is an ensemble show. It's okay that instead of focusing on a captain, that you're focusing on an officer. But the whole point of Starfleet is it's a team effort. And I want to see the team solving problems. And I would like to see Tilly be the solution one week, or Stamets, or whatever, speaking in Discovery terms. And I just didn't buy that. And again, good Lord, not only was Michael Burnham the solution to everything on Discovery, but when she's off camera, all the rest of the cast can talk about is how great Michael Burnham is. And it's annoying as fuck. It really was.
The part where it got to be a little too much for me was in season 3 when they went to Trill. And she had to jump into the damn pool. And it's like, stay out of the pool. You know, just let her have her moment.
Well,
stay out of the pool.
No, I'm with you. And again, that's another thing. They introduced this Trill idea. And I understand it's a human host rather than a Trill. So that makes it a little different. But they immediately abandoned everything that was unique about the Trill and the symbiote relationship. And I've got no problem with a non-binary and trans if Blue was, or Gray, pardon me. Blue, I believe, is the non-binary actor's name. Gray is the character of the other person in the relationship. I got no problem with that. But and that's great from a representation standpoint. Can you give us a little more, please? Can you give us a reason why they're both on the ship? I mean, again, and I'm trying to remember her name. The actor that plays the non-binary character.
I'm drawing a blank on her name.
I know. And by the way, Scott, these are main characters on Discovery, and we would not have the problem even with Enterprise, knowing what these characters' names are. And it kind of pisses me off that it's.
There was Gray. Gray was
Gray.
The other one was Adira.
It is Adira. Thank you.
I thought you meant the actor's name. I couldn't remember.
Well, Blue is Adira's real name, the actor.
Okay, and then the other one is. It'll come to me.
Okay, while you're thinking, but yeah, it's like they abandon anything that was interesting about, like I said, the symbiote Trill relationship, and it's like, well, I mean, okay, you've introduced a human that's dealing with this in the same way that Riker did in that Next Generation first episode with the Trill, and it's like, okay, go there, let's explore that. No, we better not. And also, the symbiote represents a former Starfleet admiral, and while I can't communicate with my Trill, well, that's stupid, because again, you could have, hey, you know, much like Dax, much like Jadzia, hey, you know, Curzon did XYZ, or Emily did XYZ, or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's interesting. That you've taken away the potential for a character to be much more dimensional than just, hey, I'm non-binary and I'm here. And again, I think that's great, but that is square one, and you're on a board game. And what else have you got for us? Please roll the dice and move the chess piece ahead, please.
I think part of the issue, you know, Discovery, and I mentioned this in our last conversation, Discovery, I'm tickled by that show because it's the most schizophrenic Star Trek show I've ever seen in my life, because it starts off over here and then it zigzags and then it starts to become like real Trek. But it took a while to get there. And it's almost like Discovery was the test case where they pushed it into the water and said, okay, see what's out there. And, you know, when the sharks come flying at you, then we'll know to avoid them with the next show. I
hope so. And again, we see it in Strange New Worlds. And as Wayne says, we're struggling with, you know, naming Adira and Gray, but we know the names of the Strange New Worlds crew after one season, 100%. Right. Yeah, you're right, man. And again, and also I appreciate you pointing out Discovery's schizophrenia, because they are trying to tell their story, but also there is a big enough segment of the audience. I have no idea what the percentage is, but clearly it's enough where it's like, okay, they don't like what we're doing. All right, we're going to go here. Oh, they don't like what we're doing. We're going to go here. And it's like, okay, you're trying. But again, I don't think they're there yet.
No, they are not. I think that
they have seasons, Scott.
I know. But you know, I'm not going to credit. First of all,
I am
working on it, so I can't. But the thing, you know, the thing with Discovery, I do think season 3 was stronger than season 4.
I agree with you. Yes,
and I do feel like we were kind of spinning our wheels there with season 4. Although I did like to see this. I liked seeing the Changeling. That was fun.
Yeah.
But you know, it's kind of like I get the sense that they're trying to please everybody, and at the end of the day they're pleasing nobody. You know, it's not quite as bad as Rise of Skywalker, where it was clear what they were doing with that. And I like that movie, actually. I didn't hate that. I was appreciative of a lot of that film. But that's a whole different subject. But you know, when that makeup guy was on Sirach Lofton's show, and he was talking about how they had like reams and reams of emails trying to talk about the color of the Ferengi skin to get it with the right hue of orange, because they were worried that this fan was going to say this, or this person was going to say that, or that person, and they're learning. You know, and I maybe they shouldn't have been like this, but the fact of the matter is, and this is why I give them a wide berth, and the same thing with Star Wars too, is all of a sudden you're new people taking over this stuff, and there's going to be stumbles. Yeah, they're in season 4, but
they're
figuring it out.
4, but they're on 5. But go on.
Or they're about to start 5. Yeah. But they're figuring it out, and again, that show is like the test case. I know. But you know what? I'm more forgiving than you are with this stuff.
I know, and that's good. I want us to disagree and have a conversation. This is great.
You know, I love Lower Decks. I love Prodigy. I'm happy with Picard.
You have been happy, or you haven't?
I have been, and you know, the thing is, I know there have been a lot of, you know, you talked about that one show that you listened to, and I heard him, the Popcast or something like that.
Oh yeah, the YouTube channel, the Popcast.
Yeah.
Great, and great analysis, I think, of
but the thing is, you know, they talk about it and they're like, well, there was an episode where they weren't necessarily trashing it, but they certainly weren't singing its praises. But then at the end, they're like, well, the death of Data made me cry, and then Q leaving, that made me cry too. And it's like, well, look, guys, if the show is making you cry, how can you hate it? Or how can you?
I agree with that.
And at the end of the day, these shows are, because they're continued stories, they are saggy in the middle. And get ready for season 3, because that's going to happen there too, whether you want it to or not.
I don't know. Again, there's a different. Metalis, I know, was involved with season 2 of Picard, but a lot of times, much like Ira Steven Behr in Deep Space Nine, he's the second executive producer in the credits. But
right.
Once he really took over as showrunner, he never had the produced by Ira Steven Behr and Brandon Brago and Rick Berman. And once he had control, it became a better show. And I have a suspicion that Metalis really is, and especially based on the way Gates McFadden talks in her interviews over Comic-Con weekend and others, this is going to be Terry Metalis' season. Mm-hmm. And he wrote an amazing Next Generation story for IDW back in 2013. He says all the right things on his interviews about Trek, that I and especially too, it sounds like each character is going to join the team as we progress and stories. So I don't expect it to sag in the middle. I have a feeling, who knows, season or episode 5 might be a Geordi episode, might be a Worf episode. I have no idea. But I really, again, and that is my also frustration with New Trek in general, is unlike the Bourbon era where you had to come up with 26 episodes.
I know.
26.
I know.
It's like, if you don't have and the same thing happened with the Obi-Wan Star Wars miniseries. If you don't have enough material to fit your order, then only make a 6-hour show in the case of Obi-Wan, or Discovery or Picard or any of these shows. And like you said, it's like too much spinning our wheels in the middle. Mm-hmm. And good Lord, Discovery has just been the worst, I think, offender of that. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't give them, they're still figuring it out. Fuck you. And I'm going to say fuck you. I'm saying fuck them. Right. Just on, so you don't get hey, why are you saying fuck you to me? But no, fuck them in terms of, you've had 4 years to figure it out, assholes. Figure it out. God damn it. I don't understand why it's taken this long. And I think a lot of it is, again, resistance of, there are expectations. I don't want the same story as we talked about in Voyager and Enterprise that is warmed over next gen ideas. I don't want that. I do want fresh ideas. I do want fresh thoughts. But there is an expectation of, this is a team in space, if not a military crew. Mm-hmm. And frankly, in the case of both Discovery and Pike, it's like, I'm sorry, if I were the captain of either Discovery or Pike's Enterprise, I'd be telling these people to shut up or stay in the brig and think about talking back to me. When Erica Ortegas, gets snarky with Pike, and finally in episode 10, that he finally snaps at her and goes, stand down, shut up. I am the captain. I'm giving you an order. I don't want to hear your snark. Fucking follow my orders. And that's all the subtext. He's a much more nicer man than I am. And the same thing goes with Burnham. No, Captain, we need to turn left, not right. Oh, really? That's interesting. Why don't you go sit in the brig, asshole? Again, and the same thing about, as I've said, and people love when I say this. I don't know if I've said this to you, but on Lower Decks, Mariner is Sergeant Bilko. She does not want to be there. I know. And I get that, but also making that a lead character, it's like, well, you got millions of Trek fans who would love to be on a ship and in Starfleet. And I mean, I'm not offended by it, but I don't find it funny. And it's like, and I'm glad that finally in season 2, it's like, hey, guess what, Boimler? Yeah, he's kind of a stick in the mud and everything, but it's like, no, he actually solves the problem a few times. And it's like, yeah, because this guy believes in Starfleet. And this guy believes in the whole code and everything. So I understand Langley's worry about the crossover, but I really look at it as a great opportunity. I think both actors are Tunney, Newsom, and
Jack.
I think they're very great. And I really hope they give them, beyond wisecracking, I hope they give them some stuff to really do.
What was the line in the trailer for the Lower Decks? Discover the undiscovered country. It's just like,
no, and it's
so clever.
That's low. I always feel like that. Even the DS9 joke of should we dock? No, let's slowly orbit around and then admire the pylons. Okay, now let's do it a little bit more. I mean, okay, fine, whatever. And again, I get that, but it also plays into where I think they, the producers of New Trek, they really only understand it from a surface level. I don't think they really understand. I think Metalis does, and actually, in fairness, during the Berman era, Ron Moore was like the Star Trek nerd and was kind of like made fun of. And like, yeah, thanks a lot, pal. We're reading, we're trying to make new stuff, and all you're doing is referencing Klingon lore or whatever. And it's like, no, that's we want that balance. That's why these reruns have endured since it went off NBC in '69 with the original series. We like this, and the same with the Star Wars people. And it's not like we're coming in ready to, hey, fuck you, that didn't happen or whatever. But it's like, I'm sorry, we've been reading the books, we've been reading the comics for decades, since the 70s. That Inglorious Trexpert show, they brought up one of my favorite short story collections, Star Trek The New Voyages, that came out like in 1975. And it was like one of the first like new Trek story ideas that were in books. And it was great. It was 8 stories and they were great. And they made a second one and that was great too. And that's the thing, man. No, it's like I'm sorry, whether you like it or not, it's like we believe in this universe in terms of we're entertained. I'm not saying obviously like fanatically, oh my God, it's real. But no, we do. I mean, we buy into the mythology because it's so complex and detailed and so deep. I don't know.
So speaking of Stephen Ira Bear, Cinema Blend had a story where they were talking about, what's going to happen with these DS9 characters. And I guess somebody did ask Kurtzman that during the panel. I haven't seen that part.
Neither have I. Go on.
But apparently they asked him directly about the DS9 characters. And I'm probably going to misquote it, but he said, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to spoil anything. And then he started talking about Sisko. And Cinema Blend had a theory that the actors don't want to come back without Stephen Ira Bear.
Ira Stephen Bear, but yes.
Or Ira Stephen Bear, yeah. But so they actually posed the question, would he be coming back too? Which would be very interesting.
Oh, I love that. Well, as you know from the documentary, what we left behind.
They were working on season 8.
Yeah, they made that kind of, well, if we did do a season 8, what would happen? And oh my God, it was a great idea. And IDW announced that they're doing a Sisko book that takes place after the series, and Sisko comes back out of the wormhole.
Oh, okay.
And it's on a Starfleet mission and assembles a team from other shows, and among them, Data is one of his key. I guess obviously it happens before Nemesis, but it's going to be a Cisco Data story in IDW. And I'm curious too, because to me, they kind of both play at that same, if not cards close to the vest, I say in the case of Cisco, but they are almost on the same vocal and acting temperament. I mean, as much as I do think Cisco obviously is a man of action and not afraid to make moves, I also think he's a contemplative captain. And it will be interesting seeing how, and it's Jackson Langsing who's writing this miniseries, and he's been killing it. I don't know if you read Star Trek Year 5, which is TOS in its final fifth year of the mission. It's great. It's fantastic. I mean, he has the voices of these characters down. It's excellent. And also Metalis in the Trexpert episode, they asked him about, well, wouldn't you want to, deal with DS9 characters or whatever? And he's like, oh my God. And he said O'Brien. And I suspect that O'Brien is going to show up in Picard season 3.
See, he said O'Brien was not going to be there.
Oh well.
So I think we're going to see Kira or
whoever. You're right. Maybe it will be one of the women.
The Ferengi guy. I'm drawing a blank on.
Maybe Esri. Well, Quark. It sounds like it's definitely going to be in Lower Decks.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think that I think they're going to be doing something with these characters. I think there's some kind of plan. And that's one of the reason why. Yeah, it really is, Langley.
Paramount Plus, Langley says, is a perfect place to make revival miniseries or films for the old shows. 100%, man. Well, and again, like I was saying earlier, the onus is on Paramount to keep having within a month something else with Star Trek.
Oh,
and
yeah. Well,
next month we're going to see Lower Decks coming back.
I've been going through a draw for the past couple of weeks because, it's like, where's my Star Trek? I got so used to it being every single week, from November on. I think that, and I posed the question, what about the Enterprise people? Because if they're doing this with the Voyager people, we've seen Janeway, clearly they're going to be doing something with DS9, the Picard people. What about Enterprise? Because Enterprise has its fans. I'm not one of them, but it has their fans. And I remember during Star Trek Day, the actors were talking about the impact they had on fans, and they gotten a letter from one person who said that he was going to commit suicide, and the only reason why he didn't was because he wanted to see what was going to happen on the next episode of Enterprise.
Wow. From a timeline standpoint, there's a ton of history to mine from post Enterprise years before you get to the original series.
Well, the reason I wasn't interested in Discovery was because, it wasn't because of blue Klingons or anything like that. I didn't know that until I started watching it. And then I was like, what the hell is this? But it was the fact that it was another prequel series. And I don't think that they pulled it off with Enterprise. And I always thought that Star Trek needed to go where it is now. It needed to go into the future. I wanted to see what happened in the Picard era. I wanted to see 1,000 years in the future. I was thinking 100 years, but 1,000 years is even better.
Sure.
And I loved that concept where Starfleet was basically decimated and there was no warp drive. That was great.
Well, I didn't mind that there wasn't warp drive. The reasoning why I felt was simplistic and frankly awkwardly stupid.
Yeah, but you know what? You would have seen that on a Voyager episode for sure.
I disagree.
I don't know about that.
If I may,
please.
They had the science advisor from the Berman era, from Next Gen all the way to Enterprise, is now, and I do want to talk about this show as well, is now on the Orville as a science advisor and a writer. And I'm sorry again, and forgive me for shitting on New Trek. They have a new science advisor. She's been featured on Will Wheaton's Ready Room show. I'm sorry, especially in the second episode of the Pike show, Strange New Worlds, when there's a crew member who goes, well, as we know, space is very noisy. And it's like, no, seriously, man, I am not a science major or anything, but even John Dumbass knows, no, they're in a vacuum. There is no noise. And all you need to do,
but you know what?
Hold on, as you can even watch on For All Mankind, which I love on Apple Plus. Such a great show. They're testing rocket motors at their moon base, and they're watching the video. And it's like, the Batmobile rocket engine times 100, and no sound.
Sure.
No sound at all. No static at all.
Okay, so in their defense, and this isn't just a new Trek. You can go to the Burnham era. You can go to the Trek movies. There's sound in outer space and all of this stuff. There's explosion sounds. There's the lasers. Take a look at First Contact.
Hey, TOS. Every time they fire the phasers or the photon torpedoes. No, I agree with that. But to make that declarative statement is really stupid. And it was unnecessary. I'm sorry, it's unnecessary.
It probably was unnecessary, but
again, I just wish that the science advisor would be like, well, actually, guys and women, not really. But regardless, and that's just one glaring thing. But no, man, they don't know science fiction. All they do is rehash ideas from other shows and movies. The Gorn is obviously Alien and Predator in the redesign and everything. And there's a little bit of Blade Runner in Picard with having androids and whatever, all that stuff. And I'm sorry, I am used to the idea, especially for the original series, Samuel Peoples, Theodore Sturgeon, Harlan Ellison, the sci-fi greats of the moment were writing. And you don't necessarily need those, but they should be smarter and at least introduce sci-fi ideas. My favorite example of that is, and it was just a small part of the Scotty episode of Next Generation, but coming across a Dyson sphere.
Mm-hmm.
I had never heard of the Dyson sphere until I saw that episode, and it's like, poof, that's a really interesting idea. And they extrapolated it and made it into, you know, the B plot of the episode and everything. And it's like, that's really cool. These guys, I'm sorry, after 5 years of these shows, they seem to be incapable of those kind of smart science fiction ideas. And again, that's where I feel like they just have this surface knowledge of Star Trek and not a real deep knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that if it's anything, it's too many cooks in the kitchen. You know, I was gonna make the joke when you're like, well, you know, in this era, I was gonna say, well, they had 26 episodes to work it out in there, and here they only have 10. But I didn't think you'd realize that I was kidding.
Well, you're right, and as obviously,
yeah, you would have been like,
well, my literal response would be, great. That means you can trim the fat and really focus on 10 interesting stories rather than, you know, oh shit, we need a filler. What are we going to do here? You know,
right. But yeah, you know what? It is, again, it is what it is. I
hope for the best every week.
I'm looking forward to Prodigy coming back.
Me too. Those guys, isn't it interesting that both animated shows, I think, are left to their own devices, and because of that, and they don't seem to have the heavy hand of Alex Kurtzman involved. Frank, I'm sorry, I don't like the guy. I know you don't. Not just Star Trek, but every franchise he's been involved with, they've kind of sucked.
How heavy-handed is he on these shows?
I think extremely heavy-handed.
You think so?
Yes, I do. Yes, okay. I do. And again, it's good Lord. And again, there is nothing wrong with having, as he announced on the San Diego panel, I think you can count on the fact that we're going to have a lot more shows with female leads. Great. But it's like, oh, like, how's that any different than what we're currently getting? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, maybe have one with a male lead beyond Pike. It seems like Pike is literally the only Earthman character that is allowed to be an alpha male, if you will. And I'm glad, and I think that is because, and in fact, they say it on the panel, that the Pike show wouldn't have happened. Rod Roddenberry said it. The Pike show would not have happened if we all didn't see Anson Mount in season 2 of Discovery and like, we want more of that guy. We all love this guy. And even the critics of Discovery were like, I'm not crazy about this season. However, they at least get Christopher Pike right. Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens moving forward. But yes, and while Langley says in the beginning, very heavy-handed, I still think it is. I even though I know he has moved on to Man Who Fell to Earth and the Clarice show and stuff, but I don't know, man. I don't know. And Akiva Goldsman, I'm not a big fan of either, because again, I think he is kind of shit on a few franchises that he's been involved with. And
well, he also wrote Batman and Robin, for God's sake.
That's what I mean. That's exactly
okay. Yep. Isn't it sad that after all the stuff he's done since then, that's all he's remembered for? I mean, he's involved in that Titan show, which is fantastic.
Well, and again, people have I like the Titan show as well, but I know people that aren't crazy about the Titan show. That said, though, Eric Kripke was part of the reason why Heroes took a nosedive after that first season. I mean, there was a writer's strike, but he was the showrunner after that first season, and kind of one of the reasons why it shit the bed after that. But that said, he's the showrunner on The Boys, and The Boys is exceptional. So it's the right people in the right projects and stuff. And that's why, as much as I shit on new Star Trek, I don't think it's a fait accompli that all we're going to get is shitty Star Trek. I'm like, no, new creative voices come along. Mike McMahon is like that with Lower Decks. The Prodigy people are like that. And again, and also Metalis is saying all the right stuff about season 3 of Picard. And my buddy Rob Burnett, through he won't say how or why, but he apparently got access to. It sounds like he won't say it, but you can read the lines. He got access to the scripts for season 3 of Picard, and he's like, it's going to be great.
Okay.
And really, he's like, this is what we've been waiting for, whatever. So, Langley says the Teen Titans show, can't follow you there. I thought it was the worst superhero show until Batwoman came along. Well, I certainly think Batwoman.
Well, there you go.
There. But I like Titans. I mean, it's different. And again, this is what I like about The Boys. It's different enough from the comic that it's interesting. And I don't mind the changes. I felt that way about it, the X-Men movies. I don't mind the changes. It's all right.
Depending on what those changes are, I wasn't super
Sure.
happy with Batman killing the Joker in
Oh,
Titans.
and Batwoman?
No, in Titans.
Oh, you haven't gotten there yet, but that's okay.
Oops, sorry. Oh, spoiler.
I don't mind the spoiler.
Batman
It's all
kills
right.
the Joker.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, I was in season 3.
Oh, I look
the
forward to
whole
seeing
death
that.
in the family thing.
Death in the Family, or that moment like in Dark Knight Returns, which is my favorite.
No,
Oh,
no,
man.
because he didn't kill him in the Dark Knight Returns.
You're right.
The Joker
He
killed
broke his
himself.
own neck. Yes. Which I
No.
love. I love that.
No, it was it ruined the show for the season for me because they did a death in the family, and after the Joker killed Robin, Batman killed him, and it was just like,
Wow.
no.
So does the Joker kill Jason? It's okay. You can spoil for me. Okay, great.
It's the first episode of the show.
Oh, that's great.
For the season. But yeah, they start to
I like Jason. I really like Jason on Titans. I thought he was fun.
Oh, phenomenal actor.
That's my favorite of the first season. That was my favorite episode. And that was the one I would show, or I would tell people to watch in terms of what's it like. I'm like, watch this episode because the Jason Todd, Dick Grayson conversations are fantastic.
That first season of Titans was great.
I agree with you.
The second season dragged.
Yes.
The third season, right off the bat, Batman kills the Joker. And so it was kind of like a knife in the gut for any Batman fan.
I do like their Bruce Wayne. I do like
he's great.
I really like him.
He's great. And definitely the best part of season 2. And the thing where he's doing the bat dance and everything, I was just like, oh my God, this is so fantastic.
So what do you think of the Orville?
We tried to watch it and we got midway through the first episode and I'm like, this is why I stopped watching Star Trek. And that was the end of it.
Of the first season or of the current
season? First episode, the first season.
Well, as you and I hear what you're saying, I do think that the first season of the Orville is the most awkward season.
Okay.
By mid-season 2, they've really found their footing. And this season, I just think has been exceptional. And a lot of people in the chat were saying it while we were talking about other things, and I didn't want to change the subject right away. But honestly, man, and it's all from the behind the camera standpoint, all former Next Gen and DS9 and Voyager people. Yeah. They know what they're doing. From a technical standpoint, it's beautifully shot. And by the way, I'm okay with how great new Star Trek looks from a production design and special effects standpoint. I got no problem with it. It looks fantastic. But that said, as Langley was pointing out, there are episodes in the second and third season that are absolutely the kind of stuff Next Gen in particular, or DS9, would deal with in a personal way. And Orville nails it, and nails it in a much more sophisticated writing way than new Star Trek does.
Would it help to just skip over the first season?
What I would suggest, and I'm assuming they exist, because there are key episodes to watch from the first season. And I couldn't tell you chapter and verse. What I did just recommend to a friend regarding the second season was watch every episode from 7 to whatever the last season was of the second season, because those are the best episodes. But there are scenes that they plant, and they are good episodes of the original, whatever it was. I'd say there are 4 or 5 exceptional episodes that pay off in season 2 and season 3.
Okay.
And God, their Worf character is a very interesting character. He is in a male same-sex marriage, and their race is a male race, and they have a baby, and it turns out to be a girl. And what do we do? And the practice in their race is to literally surgically correct them and turn the child into a male. And the Worf character, Bortus is his name, is like, I don't know if I want to do that. And I don't know what to do. And also, much like in a Star Trek episode, their union, their federation is like, well, that goes against all of our code of ethics. But we need their race because they are our chief weapon supplier against our major enemy. And I would also say the Krill are like their major enemy alien race. And all the Krill episodes are exceptional and need to be seen. And then also we get into their androids race. He comes from a race of androids, and that storyline is important. So those are the important storylines that are seeds in season 1. And also season 1 started way too goofy. And in season 2, they pulled away. Season 3 even more. And there are still occasional jokes, and I think they work. but they really are leaning into the action adventure and moral questions and sci-fi questions that they ask. And truly, I mean, it's been 8 episodes. 9th episode is coming this weekend. I think it's such a great show. It really, and frankly, superior to new Star Trek. And I keep saying Disney has a sleeping giant of a franchise, and it sounds like they get it, because also a big announcement that happened at San Diego was that it's been on Hulu, and now it's going to Disney Plus.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw that it was on Hulu. I didn't realize it was a Disney show.
Well, it's a Fox show, and after Fox acquired, or Disney acquired Fox.
Oh, right.
And that's it. That kind of seems to be Disney's MO, especially with the more adult fare, that initially they were just putting it on Hulu. But now, since the old Netflix shows that Marvel made are back on Disney Plus, I think they have now, because again, I think Disney Plus initially was promoted as a family streaming channel. And now they are allowing some adult fare to get in there. And there are filters, so parents can still control it. But I have seen people complain and go, well, that's, how did that set with Mary Poppins? Well, it doesn't. But Disney does more than just Mary Poppins and Mickey Mouse and the Muppets. And I love all that stuff. So I'm glad that they are moving in that direction. And and especially the Orville, because, there's some really interesting, they deal with suicide. They deal with gender identification in very specific ways. And again, I think they do it so much more sophisticated, in a sophisticated way, than we've got from new Star Trek, whether it's Discovery or Picard, in the cases of suicide and sexual orientation questions. I just think they do it better.
Yeah, I don't think they've really touched on that stuff that well at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Again, it is what it is. And
I'm with you.
But go ahead and read that.
Yeah, Langley says Orville being made into a streaming with streaming in mind instead of a network has helped tremendously. 100%. And again, my God, there are several episodes that are like an hour and 10 minutes. And McFarlane was even saying they're kind of mini movies, and they are. And I get Hulu with commercials, and I'm like, oh my God, there's still like a half hour left in this fucking thing. And 40 minutes of story have already passed. I'm like, this is fantastic. So it's really, really good. And some people have a problem with Seth's acting, and I can appreciate that. And also his penchant for putting his girlfriends on shows. The woman that's the security officer in the first 2 seasons was his girlfriend.
Okay.
And they actually took her off the show so that they could separate work from their relationship.
Oh,
but then he broke up with her, and his current girlfriend is now on the show and is the helmsman on Orville in this season. But it's really a lot of the humor has been toned down, and it's subtle, but it's really it works. It works. So you ever see Mystery Alaska, the hockey movie with Russell Crowe? Okay, because Scott Grimes, and I know he did kid stuff before he became an adult. Red hair, freckled actor. He's like Seth MacFarlane's best friend on the show.
Okay,
and he's the navigator. And hilarious, and he's great, and they've given him serious stuff, and they've given him everything that Picard and Discovery did in general in terms of, we went back to the past. Don't fuck up the past, because that's going to have future complications. That happens in both season 2 and season 3, and season 3 from a much more personal standpoint. And you finally get an argument back of, hey, you're supposed to stay hidden. You're not supposed to interfere with life. Yeah, well, I tried to do that for 3 years, and I'm a human being. I need to contact other people. Fuck the Prime Directive. I need to I need to live. And it seemed like you guys weren't coming back. And it's like, you get it. You understand. And that's the other thing that bothers me about new Star Trek is I have no problem with them saying, well, this is the correct way. But what traditional Star Trek and certainly the Berman era of Star Trek, they would present both sides. And I'm really curious with season 2 of Pike and what's happening with number 1 and La'an being augments or descendants from augments. I don't mind the debate coming up, but you better present the Federation's position of, hey, and there's and I've mentioned this before on the show. There's a great YouTuber, a trans person, Jesse Gender. They're great. I don't always agree with their critiques, but I understand where they're coming from. And in Jesse's point of view, the anti-genetic augment argument, they liken to the people that have problems with the gay lifestyle, or the trans lifestyle. I can appreciate that, but you do have to remember where it came from. And that was the guys who wrote that stuff originally, they were World War II veterans. Mm-hmm. And they knew what the Nazis were doing with eugenics. They knew what Americans were doing with eugenics. And that was their point. And that's a strong point of, yes, we accept different people, but genetic manipulation can lead to, a superior mind thinks that they're superior people, and the lesser people should be destroyed. And that argument needs to be made along with you're discriminating, it's not their fault or whatever. And I look forward to the debate. I hope there's a debate, because I have a bad feeling that it's going to be, no, you're wrong, Starfleet. And it's like,
and then episode 2, she'll be back and they'll never mention it again.
We'll see how long it takes. So I don't know. But I mean, I like that Bashir being outed in DS9, and it's like, no, this is still a problem.
Sure.
And again, you can totally understand Bashir's parents being like, we got a special needs kid, and he's really going to have a terrible life unless we give him this procedure. And of course, he becomes, the genius, and so athletically inclined as he was, or whatever. He can throw bullseyes, throwing darts.
It's interesting that they're even bringing it up. And
it is
the wherewithal to understand it. And I think that during the Ready Room, they show histories of this stuff, and they showed I believe they showed Bashir when they were talking about the augments.
Sure.
It's like the episode where they were talking about Picard's family, where his dad made an appearance, and it's like, God, they completely forgot about his brother and all of that. No, they didn't, because they showed where all that stuff came from during the Ready Room, and they showed
how did they explain Robert not being there?
They just didn't explain it. They showed. Right. Yeah. I mean, I get questions about that.
Yeah, but Scott, just go. Oh, by the way, here's a rerun of, or here's a highlight of a rerun of.
No, they were explaining about Picard's family, and they brought it up, but they didn't say, well, the sense I got out of that was that they had different moms.
Oh, I don't believe that. And again, I respect that, Scott. And you're not the first fan to go, well, in my mind, I made this leap, and it's like, that's fine from a fan standpoint. I do think they owe us an explanation of Robert was at school, Robert was doing whatever, or even better, have Robert there, have him take his father's side and go, Jean-Luc, you give mom way too much credit and way too much, you sympathize with mom too much. Father is right. You're too young to understand.
Was he younger or older?
Older.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, really watch Family again. Oh no, I think clearly Robert is an older brother. And because in fact, I even think he says things like that. And because he's like, Picard got all the breaks being the younger brother, and Robert had to, be at the winery and follow his father's footsteps to maintain the family's business and integrity and everything, or what the father perceived. Honestly, I think that was a massive mistake. And also that explanation, and you'll forgive me, but I'm going to go into my old man Picard imitation. I would even imagine having tea with my mother as an old woman. Yeah, well, why do you have a photo of her in fucking Generations in that same photo album where you're crying about Robert and Renee being killed and everything?
Who's the stepmom?
Bullshit.
Well, you know what? And let's be
again, they reference that scene in the first season of Next Gen when there is the hallucination of his mother. Sure. And that's not, again,
I know, but you know what? It's not like these things have always fallen. I mean, look at Nemesis, for God's sakes. No one mentioned lore, but yet all of a sudden Dr. Soon came up with another robot, but they never mentioned lore. But then my favorite is they show Picard in Starfleet Academy, and he's bald Tom Hardy. And we've all saw that episode where he got stabbed by the Nazi.
Right.
I said the name wrong, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Tapestry. Tapestry, where he's the young ensign.
And it's like, what are you guys doing? So, and I say, it's funny because I'm willing to give these new people credit, or I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not willing to give like the Rick Berman people the same benefit of the doubt, where it's like, why didn't you mention lore? Why didn't you have hair? It was like, so there's a double standard as far as I'm concerned.
Have you seen those photos of the hairpiece they created for Patrick Stewart before the show started?
No, I knew about it though.
They're
I've
great.
heard about it.
They're great because you could tell he's not smirking, but he does kind of have a slightly silly smile on his face to almost purposely make him look bad. And the hairpiece looked okay. If he had shown up like that, you would have been like, all right, whatever. The guy. I mean, I'm a terrible toupee spotter. I really am. I one of my bosses at WXRT wore a full wig, and I had no idea. That's a toupee, really? So, but regardless, it's like, they're fun to see. But I agree with you on that stuff where it's like, all right, whatever. Or even Sybok showing up in Star Trek V. But I like the way they handle it, where Kirk is literally like, "You're lying. You don't have a brother." Well, technically, you're right. I don't have a brother. I have a half brother. It's I got to sit down. And again, I don't know if you can go to the well that much of, all right, they had different mothers or whatever. As I told you, I believe, I'm glad we saw the back of Sybok in
I thought that was pretty great.
And I hope that, and I'm sure they will go further with that. But what I really want to see, it's like, okay, fine. I want a dinner flashback scene.
Right.
Have I told you this? Of Sarek and Amanda and Burnham and Sybok and Spock. And Sarek and Burnham are like, well, certainly the Vulcan philosophy is superior. And Amanda and Sybok going, well, the human philosophy has its strengths. And Spock is just sitting there, like, kind of taking it all in. And finally, either Amanda or Sarek say, Spock, you've been very silent. What do you think? And he has nothing to say because he doesn't know. And I want that kind of like, fine, if you're going to say that Burnham, it's like, I want to see a Burnham and Sybok scene, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. And again, it's like, you're going to do it, then fucking do it.
Right.
And don't just show us, well, here's Sybok and Spock at an earlier time. It's like, sure. But again, it's like, go all in. You're the assholes that created this shit. Go all in.
Well, and it's like I said in the text earlier today, when I saw that wormhole opening up on that Lower Decks trailer, I almost had a stroke.
Oh, it was awesome.
I was like, oh my God. So, and that's, that's an example of, we're getting it. And I think that eventually, and it's like this with the Star Wars stuff too, is we're gonna get all of this stuff. I think that at the beginning of these endeavors, you don't know because you don't quite trust these people. But as time is going on, and I'm seeing it with both. I'm seeing it with the Disney Star Wars too, where we're going to get the gaps filled in between episode 6 and 7. And they need to do that. They desperately need to do that. I don't care about any more gaps between 3 and 4, but 6 and 7, you desperately.
Yeah, a lot happened. No, you're right.
And they will. They'll do it. And it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And as long as they have the time and the money and there's the interest, they're going to do it. And I think that that's not what Star Trek has been known for up until now. But I think that we're going to get this stuff. I thought, and I mentioned this before, it was a delight to see the Trek world after 20 years. I love the fact that they tied in the whole Romulus exploding and how Starfleet did nothing because of the androids, and they didn't want to do anything anyway. I thought that was fantastic.
Well, I that's interesting because, again, I would say since the Kirk era, well, really since the Archer era, the humans and Starfleet always seem to be welcoming to other species. And I know that the Romulans were our adversaries, but for whatever reason, I didn't buy it. Although, again, they were trying to mirror our current political
right.
And I understand that from that standpoint. And it's so weird that we went from season 1 of Picard with Admiral Fuck You to, well, not only is Jean-Luc another respected figure again, but he's back in Starfleet. He's teaching at the academy. He's giving the commencement address. And it's like, wow, that's and it's only a year and a half after the events of season 1. I don't believe Starfleet, given its multi-world organization would be that flippant to go from welcoming everybody, trying to find the diplomatic solution, to no, fuck them, they're aliens, we're not helping them.
Well, I think that if you look at our world and you take a look at the end of World War II,
right,
and you take a look at what's been happening now,
yeah,
you can kind of, who would have imagined? Who would have imagined in the 80s?
But again, that is an Earth-centric point of view, and Star Trek has expanded it to be a galaxy point of view. I don't know. I'm sorry, man. Again, I think you are dealing with, and especially given that the Andorian planet has, you would assume, has as much say as the direction of the Federation as the Earth people should. I don't buy that.
But then when you take a look at that, is it insurrection, where Starfleet was involved in?
But it wasn't all of Starfleet. It was this, and there've always been rogue admirals, or rogue captains.
Well, the undiscovered country.
Absolutely, and yes. So I can appreciate rogue elements, and they do it in the novels too. But I do think it's kind of like, well, we're such a big organization, some of that shit could slip by. And even in Insurrection, and they should have hammered it more, where it's like, look, this planet can heal people.
Mm-hmm.
Why should we leave it to this small indigenous group? Why can't we broaden it to truly heal more people? Mm-hmm. And they should have played that up more. But they really was like, nope, we got to get to the action. We got to get to them, with F. Murray Abraham and the guy who played the asshole admiral and everything.
I actually despise that film. So
it would have been a good next gen episode, but it's so bloated.
When I saw it in the movie theater when it came out, and the First Contact is my favorite. I mean,
of the next gen movies, sure.
I like out of all of them. I mean, I think Wrath of Khan is overrated. Sorry, but you went from First Contact, which was phenomenal, to that, and we went back and we rewatched all the movies. And and you go through Generations. I like Generations.
No, there's good stuff in Generations.
And then First Contact. And I hadn't seen Nemesis in a long time. I had revisited it. I watched it on videotape, like when videotapes were still going on.
Sure.
And I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think it was that bad. But that was 20 years ago.
Right.
And then I just rewatched it, and I'm like, "This is terrible.
It isn't good.
This did not improve with age." And Nemesis, I like. I saw Langley had a comment a second.
Yeah, he said he dislikes Insurrection more than Nemesis. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nemesis. I think that it slips and falls in places, and I think it could have been padded out a little bit better.
Well, they had a director that didn't like Star Trek. And I mean, Stuart Baird is a phenomenal editor, and saved a lot of films in editing.
Right,
and that's why he was given a feature and given Star Trek. But you listen to on the DVDs, you listen to the commentary, and he clearly doesn't get it. And he talks about deleted scenes, and it's like, you didn't need this, you didn't need that, and it's like, most of the Trek fans I know that have seen those scenes are like, actually, you did need those things. And the other thing, Scott, I believe. It's 100-minute long movie, which is perfect for a commercial 2-hour block, whether it's network TV or cable. And I really believe that movie was cut to time to fit in a 2-hour block of commercials. And that is its detriment, because in these since years and everything, now we're in this period of, hey, if a movie's got to be 3 hours, it's a fucking 3-hour movie. Deal with it. I mean, goddamn, Irishman is 4 hours, for God's sake. So yeah, but I agree with you. And when I saw Insurrection and we got to the end, I'm like, that's it? And we're probably gonna have to wait 2 or 3 years for the next fucking movie? Good Lord, we're fucked.
Oh, it was longer than that too. It's like 5 years, wasn't it?
I don't know. I believe I maybe it was 4 or 5 years. I don't know. But all I know is, I felt the same way. Mike asked a couple questions. Do you have a favorite Trek comic series or limited series? And do you have a Trek specifically, he asks, do you have a favorite next gen novel?
I I do not have a favorite next gen. I like the Q stuff that Peter David wrote.
Me too. Me too.
I think that stuff is good. I think when it comes to novels, in all honesty, the ones that I like is I like the Voyager ones when they tell the origins of the Janeway one, and then what
her autobiography.
Yeah, that was really, really, really great.
I'm with you. I also think Kristen Byers' post Voyager TV show novels were very good in terms of what happened to everybody after the series wrapped up. I think, and I like the DS9 after the series novels. And goddamn, they just wrapped up the novel continuity because they weren't anticipating us coming back to Berman era characters in the new stuff. They wrote Coda, which is a 3-novel wrap up. Oh my God, it's the Crisis on Infinite Earths of Star Trek. And my God, Wesley is a traveler as he is in Picard. Much better handled in the novels than his little, okay, you're going to be with us. And it's like, are you doing Ready Room? Or are you Wesley again, man?
You know what? The funny thing about that, and it's kind of like, it was like Billy D. Williams in Rise of Skywalker. He was so happy to be there. He couldn't wipe the smile off of his face. Yeah. And it's like, I'm fine with that. If the actors are that happy and that excited, it's like, who am I to be like upset with that?
Well, again, I get it, but also like, I don't know, try and act a little bit. I don't know. Again, I love.
Oh, I know.
D. So I'm not going to disagree with you with Billy D. He's the man. Yeah, I mean that's my little complaint about Wesley. I also, by the way, my favorite TOS novel is called Doctor's Orders, and I believe Diane Duane wrote it. And basically, usual McCoy. Oh, you got a pretty nice life, Jim. You sit in that center chair, and everybody's got to do what you say. And he's like, "Oh, really? Tell you what, I'm giving you a direct order. You're in command. I got to go on an away mission. You're in command." And Kirk is lost during the away mission, and because it was a direct order, nobody can relieve him, and the Klingons show up. And it's angry Klingons. And it's fantastic because literally it is so in McCoy's voice. And he's like, well, can I at least get a bathroom break? And Spock thinks for a second. He goes, well, technically, yes, but I believe the captain would say you should have taken care of that before you sat down. Shit like that. Or just his solutions to these, like when the Klingons come to attack. It is such a great McCoy. And I love McCoy. And that's why I always have a soft spot for Star Trek V. With all of its warts, what I love about it most is it's the three of them throughout the movie. And I like that all the Spock and Kirk stuff from 4, Voyage Home, when they're on their little mission and Scotty and McCoy are doing their mission. But you need McCoy there. And those are the best TOS episodes when it's the three of them. And McCoy has a stake in whatever the conflict of the moment is. And it's like, no, you need these guys together. And all those character moments, even the campfire sing along. It's like, no, man, that's these guys. I know. And a lot of people, good Lord, I remember Siskel and Ebert totally shitting on that scene. Like, what the fuck is this? I love it because, again, it's like, no, man, these guys are brothers. And this is what they do. And it's adorable. So, and yes, as Langley says, flying in the face of new Star Trek, where my pain debilitates me, and I don't know if I could do this. You got Shatner in 5. I don't want you to get rid of my pain. I need my pain. And it's like, yeah, man. Again, that's why, by the way, we haven't mentioned it yet. I haven't watched the panel. I'm so glad somebody posted the Kevin Smith Shatner panel. But I
haven't watched it either.
Oh man, did you hear the reports of the panel? Okay. Kevin Smith asked them, well, let's talk about other franchises. What do you think of Star Wars? And Shatner immediately said, fuck Star Wars. And everybody went nuts. And he said, except for Mark Hamill. I really like Mark. But wait, then he also said about New Trek, he's like, I knew Gene Roddenberry. I worked very closely with him for over the years. He'd be spinning in his grave if he saw what they were doing.
Well, he probably would be. But he would have been spinning in his grave over DS9, too.
Absolutely. And Major Roddenberry even said Gene would not like Deep Space Nine. Absolutely. You're right.
I don't know. Shatner and Nimoy actually said a lot of nasty things about The Next Generation before it even came on.
Well, and again, because how can you do Star Trek without the original?
Right. So with some of this stuff, you got to take it with a grain of salt. I appreciate the fact that he said nice things about Paul Wesley.
He did say nice things about Paul
He said
Wesley.
some really nice things.
Yes.
I disagree with it, with everything he had to say, but I thought he said some really nice things about him. And
I think there's almost like an actor's code where it's like, hey man, I'm not gonna shit on an actor. I might shit on a writer or whatever, or a point of view or a direction that a show's going in. But it's and I truly feel that way. Even Sunita Martin Green is an exceptional actor. I know she is. I know.
I love her. I think she's great.
I just don't like what they write for her. And I think Paul Wesley is a capable actor. I just didn't believe in the role. And by the way, I mentioned it earlier. It seems like the casting director for Strange New Worlds had either cast him originally for the Vampire Diaries or something else, because Wesley made a reference in an interview that the way he got the job was this old casting director that had cast him for a pilot, as he said. And I'm like, that's why we got this guy. And again, that's where I wish somebody would have stood up and say, look, he seems like a good actor, but
well, they did. The conversation was there, and the conversations about a lot of the stuff we've talked about have happened. And then they just decided to do what they were going to do. I think, you know what, they're the people doing the show. So it's like, fans aren't always right about everything either.
Sure.
I hope I've been wrong about Paul Wesley.
I hope so too. And again, I like the real Paul Wesley that was on the panel at San Diego, and I hope that informs more of his Kirk as he moves forward. But right now, I'm not believing him as Jim Kirk. Again, I feel bad because I don't think it's his fault. It's either the direction or lack of direction he got on how to play this thing. And you know what? He took
the role, and you got to know who you are and where it fits, where you fit in. And if it was explained to him in a certain way, that's fine. But I just don't think he looked enough like him. I mean, even to the point where he had like black hair. And that's a petty thing. I'm an artist too, though. But
but I understand.
The visuals are important, and he just didn't pull it off. Just didn't. I
feel the same way. Like I told you, they gave him the right dialogue and the right action, but I just didn't believe the delivery.
No.
I absolutely didn't.
Not at all.
Mike wants to know if you like the TOS cartoon.
I haven't seen it since I was a kid. So I can't really comment too much about it. It was on Netflix. I know it's on Paramount Plus now, but when it was on Netflix, I believe we tried to watch it. But I'm also a 52-year-old man at this point. So watching a cartoon from the 70s, unlike the stuff now, it doesn't really fit in with the stuff I'm doing.
That said, again, what I love about it is the guy in charge of Filmation, Lou Scheimer. I saw him at Comic-Con before he passed away. And he said, I know we were a cartoon, but as far as I was concerned, we were doing season 4 of the original series. And they had, again, Theodore Sturgis, Sam Peoples, these great sci-fi, Larry Niven, these great sci-fi writers writing. And it was Saturday morning stuff. David Gerald, the Tribble writer, came back and wrote an episode. DC Fontana, Yesteryear is the best young Spock story. And I know Gene is like, well, it's not canon. All of us fans are like, no.
I think that stuff is all canon now, isn't it?
I don't know. And especially, I don't know. And it seems like New Trek is so focused on their own product that they're like, it is what it is and whatever. Have you seen the guy that animated the Next Gen and Voyager scenes?
Oh, yeah. I saw that.
Oh, my God. Those are hilarious. They're fantastic. And they even have like an Eric's crew member, like how, he was the 3-armed red alien. He's in his species is in Lower Decks as well. But they had, it looked like a frog, almost like that conservative meme of the frog, the smoking frog or whatever. But he was the navigator or the helmsman. I forget. And he doesn't have any lines, but they just show him for a second. And it's like, oh, that's their Eric's for Voyager. That's fantastic, man. So, yeah. And Langley says the new Voyager one is hilarious. No, I love the way they did it, and they used the old Filmation music.
I know they did. I know.
So funny. So, and the Borg cube is pink, the way that a lot of stuff and it's so funny. Michael Westmore said that originally for Data, he wanted Data to either be pink or gray for Next Gen.
Okay. Interesting.
And Westmore's like, well, if he's pink, it's going to look too much like human skin, and it won't light well. And he said gray. He goes, I really wanted to reserve gray for adversaries. I didn't want a hero to have gray makeup. So he said they tried a couple dozen colors before they settled on the
that makes sense, actually.
I agree. No, honestly, everybody listen on the latest Trexperts episode. Westmore tells amazing stories, and they talk for almost 2 hours. It's great. It's great.
Are they consulting him?
The current group? I have no idea. It sounds like they at the very least take inspiration from what he did.
They absolutely take inspiration from what he's doing.
And by the way,
about it.
Yeah, and also truly, much like the production design, I don't have the only beef I have is the Klingon design that was so radically different and stupid. And the other thing that you and I have talked about is they keep showing Ferengis, and I'm going to make the face. They never speak. All they do is.
Yeah, I know. They don't say anything.
It's like, wait, are the Ferengis on the short bus in the Federation? And
well, it's
they've developmentally devolved, because it's like, of all the races, like, I want to know what the Ferengis are like 1,000 years from Next Gen times. I want to know how they evolved. I hate Navarre, by the way. I think it's.
You said that. I like it. I actually think it's interesting.
Well, I think it would have been fine for the Romulans and the Vulcans to reach an understanding, but I also think that from hundreds of years, they're separate cultures, and and I know it's 1,000 years later, but still, well, it diminishes both races merging them.
But here's the thing, though. It's not just that it's 1,000 years later. Romulus was destroyed. That population was decimated.
Well, yes and no, though, because it's the Romulan Star Empire, and there wasn't just Romulus. There were just like there are other Klingon worlds.
Okay,
that was and especially from the nerd star maps, both on the shows and in books and stuff like that. I get that Romulus went away, but just like how Vulcan went away in the JJ movies, okay, but some 5 figures, I don't know if it was 10,000 or whatever, Vulcans survived, and that's why I think, yes, as bad as things got in Romulus, I do think other planets did endure and did survive. But what do I know? Actually, I read the first Riker Titan book, and it takes place right after Nemesis.
Okay.
And Riker is involved in a diplomacy thing between the Romulans and the Remans. And in the fallout of Shinzon, what do we do? And and even Spock even shows up and is an important minor character in the story, which is cool. And also, if you remember the original series episode, Friday's Child with Julie Newmar, and her child has grown to an adult and is now one of the main members and an ambassador in the Federation. And he's there, and he's like, Spock, it's good to see you. And, he's like, I've been aware of your career since our first encounter when you were born. I'm very impressed with, your life. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. And then it's the kid, and now he's an adult. So, no, I love shit like that. Oh, Langley says, that's what was odd about Picard. The Romulans had as many planets as the Federation. Yeah, man. No, I agree. Again, it's like, and again, now that Navarre, it's like Vulcan, what new Romulus, whatever, new Vulcan. I mean, whatever you need to do, but I believe they are, even though they were spawned from the same race originally, I think they evolved into apples and oranges. But that's me.
I don't know. I like it.
It's all good, man. All right, listen, I've kept you for 2.5 hours. Good Lord, it's 10:30 our time.
Yeah, it is.
But
my cat has been walking in begging to be fed. Well, he's got his set times, and sometimes he just needs to wait.
No, I understand, but also
I'm Star Trek.
You're married. I'm keeping you from your wife and everything.
That's right.
I appreciate the bullshit as always.
Oh, sure.
And everybody, seriously, if you're coming to C2E2, do you know your row and table?
Yes, I am at W3. So it's Artist Alley W3. I'm listed as Visitation's comic book. And then I do send out free digital copies of Visitations #1.
Yep, I've got it up on the TV screen for our audio audience. Again, to get a free digital copy of issue 1, you want to hit up Scott at this email site, visitationscomicbook@gmail.com.
Correct. And it's basically the first issue is an introduction to the characters, and subsequent issues focus on different characters, and then they start to come together as the story moves on. So it's kind of like what John Byrne did in Alpha Flight.
No, I get it. Absolutely. And everyone is thanking us for the conversation. I appreciate that.
Thanks, guys.
And great questions, everybody. Great comments. So you're going to be at C2E2 in not this weekend, but the following weekend. And then in October, you're going to be at Baltimore.
Right. So at C2E2, I'm doing, in addition to my table at Artist Alley, I will be doing the Ghostly Landmarks. And that is Saturday night. I believe it's at 5:30.
Okay.
5 or 5:30. And I don't know the room number off the top of my head, but it's on the website.
Yeah. The schedule's up for C2E2. So yeah, check it out, man. For Saturday, Scott's panel. I'm doing a panel as well with the Oh Yeah podcast guys, Art Franco and Scoot and Skokie Spidey. And there's our little thing there. We're doing it on Sunday at 11:15 in the morning. And it's the Oh Yeah Comics podcast panel. And you can see even ghost stories there. Maybe we'll get to ghost stories. We'll see. But yeah, no, I'm excited for C2E2. I'm also excited. This weekend, I'm doing Terrificon. This is probably the last new word balloon until after Terrificon, just because got to get ready for this week and everything. But I am going to be putting up some reprints. Everybody, if you see when I do word balloon reprints of old episodes, I've been looking at the feed. And again, I've been doing this since 2005. And there are only in some of the early episodes, only a couple hundred downloads. And I know normally, we do 10, if not 20 times that for episodes. And it's like, oh, please, these are great conversations. A lot of big celebrities have come on in the last 17 years. And that's why I represent them. And it seems like these are new to a lot of people, and they're still evergreen. There's still good, conversations. So
those conversations, I mean, honestly, real quickly, when you were mentioning my biography and you mentioned the Kong, King of Skull Island, I never would have gotten that job had I not been listening to Word Balloon.
I had no idea,
because you had Brian Bendis on one of those older programs. He mentioned a couple of different websites that artists could go on looking for writers, and I did that, and I ended up getting that Marcosia job because of it.
That's fantastic, man.
So Word Balloon helped my career immensely.
Wow. Well, as I always say, when I hear something like that, or when a reader says, I never would have read so-and-so's book had I not heard him on Word Balloon, my comment, I will quote that tweet and I always put, the system works. And it's like, yeah, man, I want to create awareness. And that's why I'm happy to talk to Scott about Visitations. And again, this is the coloring book, but he's got 7 issues waiting for you. Great supernatural stuff. A nice little mild history lesson as well about, it's historic fiction essentially, which is great. And yeah, you'll get quite a education reading Visitations, along with entertainment as well. So, Scott, thanks a lot for joining me tonight. Everybody, thanks a lot